Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Okay, I've got to try and find where I'm at here.
There's no picture though. How do I get my picture up?
No, I'm not getting a picture either.
Try this is Don. I'm on from Coastal Engineering.
I got you.
No, I don't have my picture up.
The lower left corner, there's a stop and start video. You have to kind of scroll your mouse down around the lower left corner.
And then we'll open it up for public comment, just so everybody understands the process. The first hearing is Candell, 60 Bayview Avenue, map 35, parcel 37. It's a notice of intent for revetment and repair. Is someone here for that?
Perfect.
Hi, I'm Erica from Coastal Engineering. I'll be presenting on that.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and tell us about your project?
Okay, so the project is just a simple revetment repair to the existing revetment. There's slumping right under the existing stairs and a portion where the revetment goes lower in elevation. So it's two small portions, about 10 feet wide. They just need to remove the stone and then rebuild it in those two slumped areas. Are there any questions?
Yes, how high is it?
How high is it?
Remove the stones and replace them. You said 10 feet long, but you didn't give us the height.
Let me pull the plan up. About to elevation, it's around elevation 16, so the slumping is towards the middle, so maybe around elevation 12.
So the total area involved?
It's a really small portion for each area. I would say I have it on the plan. In total, it's about 92 linear feet, maybe around 1,000 square feet.
Do members of the commission have questions?
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes, John. I'm sorry, I neglected to do something at the beginning, which is to state which members were here at the beginning. And let me just state that now. Barbara Brennesel, Leon Shreve, John Portnoy, Michael Fisher, and myself, Deborah Freeman. Go ahead, John.
Looking at the plan view on the plan sheet, could you explain to me how you'll access the revetment from Bayview Avenue? Maybe you could explain. I don't know if you can share your screen or explain from the passage from Bayview Avenue to the beach. to the revetment?
So currently, they'll come down. Let me see if I can share my screen. So the access will be from this. All right, let's see. Will be from the property to the north. There's Bayview Road, is it? Let me see. So they're going to be coming from Old Wharf Road. That that property to the north has granted us access to go over their property to come down with the stone. They actually won't be using any stone, just the trucks will be come down and they'll remove the stone and replace it with the existing stone.
Will the access be from the, will the access be from the top or on the beach?
From the beach.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask
You're
a question
welcome.
about that? Are you going across the Conservation Trust property or are you going over Mr. Behringer's property? I guess I'm unclear where you're going from Old Wharf.
It's now Mr. Vecchio's property. It used to be
Oh, the old Glaze
the
property.
Glaze property.
Okay, so you're not going onto the Conservation Trust property, you're going over the Vecchio property.
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have something in writing that indicates your permission to cross the property?
I believe we do have an email from him we can submit.
If you would submit that to the conservation agent, please.
Okay.
Hillary, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have another concern because of the septic system location on that property. Can you show us the traveled path that you're going to be using just so we can make sure you're avoiding other important things to us?
The travel path from the Vecchios.
Yeah.
So they have used that in the past to deliver stone and sand. So they're just going to be going through their driveway and then up over their access point. I don't believe it goes over the septic.
To the left of the house. They're going,
Yes.
the trucks go to the left of the house, the septic's on the right. Okay.
Yes.
Are there other questions from the commission? Are there questions from the public?
I guess I have a few more questions if nobody has any questions, Debbie. So when they remove the rocks, they're placing them onto the bank? Is that my,
Yeah, they'll peel it away from where it's existing on the bank. They'll fix the filter cloth and they'll put the stones back in. So it will probably be on the beach just a little bit, but just for as they're fixing it.
How long will it take to fix it?
I think this project will just take a day.
and there, just so the commission is aware, there's already beach nourishment requirements on this site.
Yes.
Hillary, have those been complied with?
Yes.
Anything else from anybody? Could I have a motion, please?
Okay, I'll move that we approve the notice of intent for revetment repair for Candle 60 Bayview Avenue.
Is there a second?
I'll second, Leon.
We need a voice vote on this. Leon, how do you vote?
Yes.
John Portnoy,
Yes.
Barbara Brennisell,
Yes.
Ben Fairbank,
Yes.
Michael Fisher, I'm not hearing anything from him. John Kumbler,
Yes.
Barbara Brennisell.
I already voted yes.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my screen. And Debbie, yes. So I think you're all set.
I just want to add a condition. We're going to have the beach nourishment in perpetuity and a pre-construction site visit with the shellfish constable, just so we can make sure we're avoiding all shellfish resources because she's not on the meeting tonight. So
Good job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We should sign Form 5 for this.
order of conditions.
Form 5, okay.
Supervisor?
I'll supervise it, Hillary.
Okay, thank you.
So that means before any work starts, you have to contact the supervisor. And the supervisor would like to be present on the site when work starts.
Okay.
All right, that's all set unless there's anything else on that one.
Yeah, it's Don from Coastal. I have one question about the supervisor. Do we contact the supervisor through the agent?
No, you will get the supervisor's phone number on your order of conditions.
Oh,
And
cool.
Reach out to the supervisor and don't forget the shellfish constable.
Okay, great. I like it.
So I will see you at the site when you are ready to begin work. All right, the next one we have is Laurel Nominee Trust, Zimmerman, 175 Chequesset Neck Road, map 113, a request for a 2-year extension. Is anyone here for that?
So I spoke with them and they were not going to be present tonight at the hearing, but they need an extension just to finish up the project. The construction's done. They're still finishing up a little bit of landscaping and just polishing a few things off. So they just needed a slight extension to complete the work.
Why did they ask for 2 years if it's a slight extension?
They want to make sure the planting stays and they don't have to replant anything.
Okay, John Kumbler, did you have a question?
The one you just asked, Debbie.
Okay, any other questions from the commission? From the public? Okay, do we have?
Excuse me, one point.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Can you hear
Michael?
this, Mike?
Yes,
It's map 19, parcel 113.
Yes.
Okay, so
it's wrong on our agenda. Thank you very much. It's map 19, parcel 113.
Yes.
Thank you very much for correcting that. Any other comments?
Can you hear me?
Yes, would you state
Hi,
your name?
this is-
Please state
this
your name.
This is Steve LeBranch from Wilkinson. I just wanted to correct the address as well. It's actually 715 Chequestet.
oh,
Okay, well, that's problematic. I think that because of the open meeting law, we'll probably have to rehear that because it's the wrong address.
Okay, it was submitted as 715, but then it came out on the agenda as 175.
Hillary, what do you think? I think we'll have to rehear that.
I think we can rehear it. It's not a deal breaker.
Okay, so we'll continue that and rehear it.
In 2 weeks.
Okay.
Do we need a motion?
Yes, please.
Could I have a motion to continue Laurel Nominee Trust?
this is Barbara. I move that we continue Laurel Nominee Trust.
Is there a second?
Second, Michael.
Second.
Thank you. I need a voice vote. Barbara,
Yes,
John Portnoy,
Yes.
John Kumbler,
Yes.
Ben Fairbank,
Yes.
Michael Fisher,
Yes.
Leon Shreve,
Yes.
and Debbie Freeman, yes. That's all set for the extension then. I'm sorry, for the continuance. The next matter is Mandel Family Trust, Realty Trust, care of Marion Fontaine, 41 9th Street, map 40, parcel 155. It's a notice of intent to construct a single-family dwelling, including septic system, well, underground utilities, driveway, and grading. Is there anyone here for Mandel?
Hi, good evening. This is Stephanie Sequin. I'm with Ryder and Wilcox, and I'm actually representing the applicant is J&B Construction, who has an agreement to purchase the property. Mandel is still the owner.
Okay. Do you want
And
to?
also with me, I want to make sure she's connected.
Yep, this is Jen Crawford. Can you hear me okay?
Okay, Jen Crawford with Crawford Land Management. We met on this project on October 21st, and there was quite a bit of discussion, and obviously we've provided some more information at your request. So hopefully you've received and had a chance to review the revised site plan. We reduced the footprint of the house. We rotated the location of the proposed house slightly to maximize the setback from the two banks that we have on either side of the property. As it's currently positioned, the proposed house is 80 feet from the coastal bank to the east and 82 feet from the coastal bank to the west. The proposed deck is about 70 feet from the top of the coastal bank. Also on the revised site plan, we have reconfigured the proposed well and septic location. We're showing now a proposed well in the northwest corner of the property, which is outside of the 100-foot buffer. And this allows us to put a new leaching system more in the center of the property. Within the existing cleared area, we're showing a leaching chamber system and also the location of an Advantex treatment system, which is an IA technology that provides nitrogen reduction. We also included the details and specifications for the proposed septic system, including the alternative treatment technology. The proposed, with this new building location, and that was one of the other reasons that we repositioned it and rotated it, it gave us a little more room to the east of the building to allow the proposed or the existing right-of-way to be moved a little bit further from the house, but still maintaining the 50-foot buffer to the coastal bank on the east. So those are the changes to the proposed site plan. We also submitted, as you requested, the proposed floor plans and elevations of the new building. And I think what is worth noting on those architectural plans, portion of the proposed building, the south end of the building, is not going to have any kind of crawl space or basement underneath it. That is just going to be storage on the first floor, a screen porch on the second floor, and that will be constructed on posts supported by either sonotube footings or helical piles. So there's no foundation under that end. So we made that, sort of clarified that on the site plan, and you can see that on the architectural plans. And I think the other thing that's worth noting on the architectural plans, it does illustrate and show that the proposed deck is at the second floor level, elevated 8 or 9 feet off the ground. And so that is going to allow the ground underneath the deck to remain pervious and to be partially vegetated. So then we also, in addition to the revised site plan and the architectural plans, Crawford Land Management has provided a planting mitigation plan and narrative. They're showing a very extensive revegetation plan that will offset, that will restore not only the areas that are temporarily disturbed during the construction, but will restore some of the existing disturbed areas. So I guess I would either be happy to answer any questions you have about the site plan, or I could turn it over to Jen Crawford and she can walk you through the proposed mitigation plan.
I think probably we should separate the two and allow the commissioners to ask questions now on what you've described and then come to the mitigation plan.
Okay.
So if the commissioners have questions. Leon?
Yes, sorry.
What is the total square footage of the disturbed land due to this construction? That would include the walkways and the drive.
I'm sorry, Leon, you faded out.
Oh, my finger slipped. Just that I'd like to know the square footage of the house, the decks, the walkways, etc.
Anything within the 100-foot buffer.
Okay. And I think, Jen, did you have a figure on that? Is just under 3,000 square feet?
Yes, that's correct. This is Jen Crawford with Crawford Land Management. So post-construction conditions after revegetation of the currently disturbed area as well as within limit of work would mean that the total site disturbance within the 100-foot buffer would end up being 2,969 square feet. The current disturbed area on the property as it exists right now is 3,111 square feet. So there would be less disturbed area post-construction.
That is detailed on the plan as well that Crawford submitted. It's underneath sort
Correct.
of the focus drawing in 2 rectangles.
Correct.
John Portnoy, I believe you had a question.
Yeah, this is completely new construction. And I wondered if we need to, I know this property at present doesn't include coastal banks within the within the property line, but in the future it might, well, it will actually. So do we need to document, clearly state in our minutes that this property is not eligible for coastal engineering structure in the future?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It should be in the order of conditions, wouldn't it, Hillary?
Yes, it could be a condition, absolutely.
John Kumbler, are you raising your hand?
No, I was just going to reinforce what John just said.
Okay.
Debbie, I have a small question.
Go ahead.
So on the site plan, it has a total of 1,520 square foot for the dwelling. But on the lower level plan, it has 1,424 square feet. Is there something that's not included?
Maybe the porch?
It may be the entry porch that the architect did not include because it's not enclosed. I included in the 1520, I included everything with the roof, which would include that open porch.
Thank you.
Are there other questions from the commission? Hillary, do you have questions?
I do not at this time.
Okay. All right. Why don't we hear then from Jen Crawford, and then we'll open it up for public comment. Okay.
All right, good evening. So Stephanie covered some of the basic pieces of the mitigation plan that we put together for you. In short, the area of disturbance in any of the construction areas Once those areas are ready to be revegetated, one of the first things that we would do is check for soil compaction. If there is any soil compaction, we use a compaction meter for that. If there is any soil compaction, those soils would be decompacted before any planting or seeding takes place to make sure that we are giving those plants the optimum conditions in which to establish and thrive. All of the disturbed areas as shown on the plan would be seeded with a native grass seed mix, which is listed on the mitigation plan. The area would be covered with a chopped straw to help aid in germination. After that, the area would be planted, as you see on the plan, with the native shrubs and pollinator species that we've included, along with the access way to be vegetated with American beach grass. It's a pretty straightforward restoration plan, so I'm happy to answer any questions about it. All of the calculations and plant specifications and numbers have been included on the plan for your review. The summary version is a total of over 200 shrubs and woody ground covers would be added to those areas, all species of which are completely appropriate for those site conditions, some of which are already existing there naturally, as well as over 4,000 grasses, sedges, and forbs being planted, and then the addition of the native seed mix. So the area should become well vegetated relatively quickly. With that, I'm happy to answer any specific questions you might have about it.
Do any of the members of the commission have questions?
Is there an irrigation plan on here? Temporary irrigation?
Yes, I believe in the narrative I submitted.
Okay.
One of the bullet points on that would be to include an above ground and temporary system provided for the planted shrub materials for the first 2 to 3 growing seasons until establishment. Just the areas that are, if they're seeded or plugged, they really don't need that supplemental irrigation. So we would only be targeting irrigation on those plants that really needed it for establishment.
Okay, thank you. I see the bullet now. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I had a question about the irrigation also. You show quite a bit of planting and I guess quite a bit of irrigation. How do you know the groundwater quality, the salinity is low enough in groundwater to support these plants?
One of the things that the J&B Construction has proposed, or as an idea at least to present to you, would be using a rainwater catchment system in order to help with the irrigation requirements for the plants. And so that's something that we would hope to be able to utilize.
Excuse me, would the rainwater irrigation system provide enough water for all the irrigation on the site for the 2 to 3 growing seasons?
That's something that would depend on rainfall and the requirements. Really, the plantings only need supplemental irrigation during July and August. Those are typically the 2 hottest months. And we do have, those are the 2 hottest months where we would hopefully need to just supplement at the times when we are in hot and droughty conditions. The plants are typically installed either early spring or even in the fall. So they do have some time to acclimate a little bit to the site conditions before the hot part of the season.
Debbie, can I follow up on this?
Yes.
So in the construction note 5, it says that the gutters and downspouts were connected to dry wells, not to be saved for watering.
It was something that the project team actually had discussed after we submitted those plans. It was something that we weren't sure if the commission would be amenable to or not, since we know that you like your stormwater from the roof runoff put into dry wells. So I guess it's really a question for you if that's something that you would be amenable to or not.
Okay.
So maybe, can I comment on that?
Sure.
So I guess what Mr. Fisher is, I'm not sure if he's making a suggestion or just a question, but if it's a suggestion, I think it's a good one, maybe of somehow using the roof runoff for the irrigation, which I would think would be pretty easily accomplished.
But that might just be till the plants are established and then revert back to the drainage system. That's
Right.
So that would need to be a condition, I would think.
But either way, it would be, the roof runoff would be recharged below the surface.
Yes.
John Portnoy, did you have a question?
Is there a survival requirement?
For the plants?
Yeah, for the plants.
I think that it would probably have to be 3 years.
Okay, because,
A percentage of the plantings.
yeah, okay. I mean, that's fine as long as there's that requirement. I was just thinking how dry it was last summer and you'd probably lose that. That's quite a contingency to plan on rainfall. And it doesn't happen, you lose a bunch of plants, but if you're required to replace them, I guess, we're covered.
Are there any other comments on the planting plan and the mitigation, or the planting/mitigation plan? From the
What is
commission?
the percent survival of the vegetation that you want? 75%, 80%?
Ms. Crawford, do you have anything to say about that?
I find that it's different in every town with every commission. Some require 90% survival, others require 80%. I think realistically, with a site like this, I think an 80% survival rate is very good over 3 years, because I think once things have made it through 3 years, the trajectory that they're on is pretty well established.
So Hillary, 80%. Leon, did you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to note that if there is a rain catchment system, the overflow from that should go into a dry well, which probably would be what you would use after you take out the catchment system.
Yep, that makes sense.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from the commissioners? All right, I'd like to hear from members of the public. Is there anyone who would like to speak?
Yeah, hi, my name is Jeannie Campus. I represent Mr. Thaler, who owns the property next door. Good evening, everyone. We received these materials yesterday, so we haven't had a full opportunity to really review them, but upon our review, our main concern remains, and that is with the water quality of the private water supply. And, these supplemental materials don't address that issue at all, in our opinion. The applicant has failed to show how this project will not result in any adverse effects to the private water supply and the groundwater supply. And both of these are expressly protected by both the Wetlands Protection Act and your local regulations. My recollection was the last time is that the commission required the applicant to provide water test results. And I haven't seen those to date. And I know that the abutters have obtained water results, and they show extremely high levels of sodium in the water. Also, they also show, some of them, low levels of pH, which we think is a result of the high salinity in the water. These sodium levels are up to 200 times what the federal drinking water standards are, which is 20 milligrams per liter. The neighbors' results range from, over 400 to over 2,000 milligrams per liter. So the situation is really bad. And this magnitude of this project is only going to exacerbate those conditions. And quite honestly, they haven't really done anything except shrink the length of the house by 2 feet to reduce, the magnitude of this project. It's a large 3-bedroom house with an extra office. I don't know if it has any basement area, but it's a large house. The footprint is 1,520 square feet. It's 2,800 square feet of a house. And the old house was 554 square feet. So you're talking about a house that is 5 times the size of the prior dwelling, and it's a year-round house, whereas the old one was a seasonal use. So that's our primary concern, is the water quality and how it's going to affect the neighbors. And along with this irrigation system, it looks like if rainwater is an option, that sounds great. To the extent that, you know, the water supply is used for this irrigation, it's also going to affect the neighbors and affect the neighborhood.
Could you,
No,
excuse
sorry.
me, could you speak to whether the problems with the water predate the structure that was there before? Were they present with the prior structure?
You know, I think they've been there. I think they've been exacerbated over the years. And the addition of this house that is 5 times the size of the prior cottage will certainly make this worse, not better. And it's upon the applicant to show that there will be no adverse effects on the water, on the private water supply. And that just hasn't been shown here.
Hillary, do you want to comment on that?
Well, they're not increasing the number of bedrooms, and so the flow is determined by the number of bedrooms in the dwelling. So, I mean, you can have a bigger bedroom and it's still occupied by the same amount of people. So I think that's how we've always looked at this, is by bedrooms, not by the size of the dwelling. I mean, we have some pretty large 1-bedroom dwellings in town, but they have big kitchens and big living rooms, and it's just a matter of preference for the folks that are moving into it. So I don't know that I'm hung up going from a 3-bedroom dwelling to a 3-bedroom dwelling.
You know, I would add that under your regulations and the definition of a bedroom, I don't believe any of the prior bedrooms were over 70 square feet. They wouldn't even meet the definition. And here you have 3 large bedrooms, a large living area, a large office, which could be very easily considered a bedroom under your regulations. It's not a pass-through room, you know, and there's I don't think there's any question that there is going to be a significant increase in the residential use of this dwelling, both in terms of year-round versus seasonal, and the number of occupants it can actually hold, regardless of the fact that the number of bedrooms is technically the same.
It's disingenuous, Hillary, to suggest.
Excuse me, Taylor, before you speak, you have to get permission. You have to raise your hand. You have to introduce yourself. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Thingler.
I think it's disingenuous to say 3 bedrooms are the same as 3 bedrooms. The office in this proposed dwelling is larger than the entire sleeping area of the old house. I know the old house well. My children stayed there many times. And Jeannie is correct. The average bedroom size was about 70 square feet, which can barely accommodate a bed. And so one has to be thoughtful about this. You're going to have a lot more people jammed into the house, a lot more bathrooms, and it is going to have substantially greater demand on the water pressure and on the water quality. And we did do the testing, and just for examples, the ranges are between 660 mgl to 2,400 in salt right now. And yes, the salt has been present for a long time, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse. We all drink bottled water from Poland Spring. We all wipe down our showers to prevent corrosion. And the pH is also a problem as well, high acidity, and it's going to get worse. And the irrigation system is going to further exacerbate the problems. And I might also point out that this whole lot is going to be virtually defoliated before it is refoliated. And you're going to hope that you can use this high sodium water, if you can't get the runoff, and this low pH water to make those plants grow. And my good friend who's on the phone, Christine McDonald, can comment on her growing activities with this saline water, but they haven't been good.
Okay. Are there responses from the commission or questions from the commission at this point?
Debbie, if we could go back to Stephanie, she had her hand up.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I just wanted to respond to the comments about the size of the former building and the size of those bedrooms. Yes, they're small, but I think everyone accepts and understands there was a building there and there were 3 bedrooms there, and people certainly did occupy that building regardless of how the size, the square footage of any of the rooms. The office that's being proposed has a 6-foot cased opening, so it doesn't provide privacy. We are going from what had been very clearly, I don't think anyone could deny that there was a 3-bedroom house there, and it's going to remain a 3-bedroom house. Houses do not use water. People in the houses use the water. So that's why the sewage flow, the water usage is not based by the size of the building. It's not based on the size of the total square footage. It's based on how many people are going to be occupying the building. So I believe the rooms that we have laid out here, according to the Board of Health definitions, are just 3 bedrooms, no more than that. As far as the ability, Mr. Thaler mentioned the irrigation system, and I believe he has an irrigation system for the plantings on the bank. I don't know if he may be able to.
That's not for us.
Okay.
Could you speak, please, to the quality of the water? Has it been checked?
We have not done another test well. The well driller has submitted the application for the well permit, and I think is waiting for DigSafe to mark it out. And hopefully next week we'll be able to dig a test well and take a water sample.
Are there other questions from members of the commission?
I have one more question. Stephanie, do you or Jen have an idea which way groundwater flows here?
I do not.
I do not.
Okay. John Kumbler?
Yeah, I think bedrooms are used as a surrogate for a number of people staying in the house. That being the case, the size of the bedroom does make a difference. Whether it's a 1-person bedroom or a 2- or 3-person bedroom, that makes a difference in terms of the impact on water usage and sewage as well. I am somewhat convinced by the argument about the fact that this house will have a much greater impact on water use. I think there's a difference between the water use in a cottage with very small bedrooms and the water use of a very large house with very large bedrooms. So I think we have to take into consideration when we look at this project. The size of the bedrooms make a difference to me, because I think bedrooms are not what we're asking. What we're asking is the number of people, and bedrooms for that.
Hillary, do we have any ability as a condition to look at the number of people and limit it?
Absolutely not. I am not going to be the people police anywhere in Wellfleet. I mean, it's just not reasonable. And that's why we have Title V, which establishes flows per bedroom. So, I mean, we are aware that there is a sodium issue on Lieutenant's Island. There has been one for years and years and years. It's not a new phenomena out there. There are big houses, there are small houses, but we regulate based on the number of bedrooms.
Okay. I'm looking at the member of the audience who's had his hand up for quite a while. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Would you please state your name?
Hi, my name is Jamie Rice, and I'm the owner of 51 9th Street, right next door on the other side of the property, and then next to Mr. Thaler. I've been a homeowner here for 4.5 years. And I just wanted to share my experience with my well and my well water. And as I look at the site plan here, it looks like, according to the scale, their proposed well location is 8 feet from my well, which makes me nervous on supply alone. But the salination is very high as well for my property. And I'm on my 2nd well, and I'm on my 4th water heater in 4.5 years. And the water heaters have, the reason why they've burned out is because, according to the technicians, the salination, the sodium content has been a problem. So I don't have any other problems besides this, but I mean, water to me right now, it seems like it has been bad from the beginning. I don't know if it's worse, you know, because I've only been there 4.5 years, but having a well next to another well only 8 feet away makes me really nervous that my water supply can't be guaranteed. So I'm worried about that. And I don't want to change the subject, but I do have a big question on this, with the property extending into 9th Street here. It hasn't been discussed yet, and maybe we can discuss it later, but to the extent 9th Street is a road that goes to it's really a public access to the beach. And there's this big staircase that goes down to the beach with folks from all the homes in the area use it to get there. I'm not sure if this is encroaching on the road or not. It looks like it does. And it's also the only way I can drive into my property. So I'm fairly concerned that it's going to encroach on my ability to get to my own house. I don't know what the ordinance would be that would give me some recourse here, but I'm worried about that as well. So I just want to add that to the conversation. Thank you.
Stephanie, have you spoken with Mr. Rice about his access?
No, I have not. But it is not encroaching into 9th Street. If you look at the site plan, we have 9th Street labeled, and there's a shaded area that is indicating the existing dirt driveway, I guess. So we're definitely not building beyond the property line abutting 9th Street. And just the distance between Mr. Rice's, Mr. Rice, you're immediately to the west, correct? Of this property?
Correct.
Okay, so the proposed well is 18 feet from your existing well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm just using the scale that's on the site plan. It relates to less than 10 feet on the site plan.
What was the sodium content in your well, Mr. Rice? Through you, Debbie, to Mr. Rice?
Mr. Rice, do you know?
No, I don't have it with me. I apologize.
Could you supply that to the conservation agent, please?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Okay. John Kumpler, before I call on you, there are 2 women who've had their hands up for quite a while. Let me get to them. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm Marion Fontaine. I'm one of the owners of the land, and I just want to say a few things about what Richard commented on. Our cottage is closer to 700, was closer to 700 square feet, and that did not include the porch. There was 3 bedrooms, but there was 5 siblings and my parents and friends that went down, and we did not have any problems with the water. It never tasted good. My parents and my grandparents have been coming down since the 1920s, and the water tasted terrible then. We had our water tested 15 years ago or 10 years ago when we had a new well put in, and it still tasted exactly the same. So I don't think that a 3-bedroom cottage that's big is going to make a difference with the water, because it already doesn't taste good.
Thank you. The other woman in blue who had her hand up, please. We can't hear you. You have to turn your microphone on. I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Hold on.
No.
Just
Okay.
hold this bar down.
Could you please state your name?
Christine Young, and at 31 9th Street. Somebody asked the question about which direction the aquifer runs in. I'm not absolutely certain about this, but I believe it runs from so what direction is that? North to south. I heard that from Mr. Eldridge, who is my next neighbor down from me, but I don't know if that's true or not. But back to the difference between the cottage and the house. one of the things that has been sticking in my mind is that, unless I'm wrong, the Mandel's property has always been elevated. Is that right? Sort of up on cinder blocks, which leaves that land open for water to get in, whereas this house is going to have a solid foundation, and just like a parking lot would do, would diminish the amount of water that's actually going to be going into the ground. Do you follow what I'm saying? Anyway, that's a concern of mine. The water, I will agree with Richard, we've put in 3 new hot water heaters. The bottoms fall out no matter what we do and flood the house. We have, in terms of them regrowing vegetation, there have been 2 summers in the past 10 years. It's only in the past 10 years where the more we watered our garden areas, or where things needed to be watered to grow, they died. The only way they lived is if we stopped watering them and, you know, poured bottled water on them. So I'm estimating that the amount of, I call it toxicity, saline, I guess, in the water is increasing. And I have a question about what vegetation is being taken out. Are we talking about little bushes? Are we talking about large trees that are near either the embankment on the east or near the embankment on the north?
There is a whole vegetation plan.
I don't have a vegetation plan.
Jen, do you want to comment on the removal of trees?
Yes, so in regards to being near the embankment, this property sits almost 50 full feet back from both coastal banks. So no vegetation along those coastal banks will be removed because it's simply off of the property. Much of the limit of work that's within that 50 to 100 foot buffer zone is shrubland community, which is why we've proposed to replant shrubland community in those areas directly adjacent and in the current disturbed area. The other thing that I have spoken with the team about just in the few minutes here that I've not been talking, in terms of the supplemental irrigation for the planting, we would be happy to provide the rainwater system that we've been discussing from the roof runoff, but we also in turn would be amenable to not taxing any additional watering from a well system, but simply replacing anything that dies. And obviously that means on our end that we will be replacing more than if we were able to supplemental water, but we feel that may be something that can help in the immediate future, so to speak, with those additional water requirements. So we would be amenable to replacing more plant material to get that 3-year survival rate rather than using a supplemental irrigation system that was not rainwater driven.
Hillary, could we then move it up to 90% survival rate?
Sure, if you were so inclined.
Okay, John Kumbler.
Yes. How many bathrooms were in the original cottage? Does anyone know the number of bathrooms? It's a question.
Ms. Fontaine, could you answer that? I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Yes, we only had 1 bathroom in that small house. It's 700 square foot, and the home we were going to build had 2 bathrooms.
So the present plan has 3 bathrooms. Is it also going to be an outdoor shower in this?
We had an outdoor shower planned for that cottage.
I think the fact that there is an extra bathroom in the new construction does point to the fact there will be greater water use.
I'm sorry, I didn't know who that was. Go ahead, please.
Me? Okay, yeah, I disagree with the comment that extra bathrooms mean more water use. Whether, regardless of how many bathrooms I have to choose from, I take one shower. So it, again, it's not the building that uses the water, it's the people in the building. So 4 people are not, whether they're sharing 1 bathroom or 4 bathrooms, they're going to use the same amount of water.
Go ahead, please.
Me?
Yes.
Hi. Sorry, I had a couple more points that I wanted to make, but while we're on the water quality issue, the Board of Health regulations specify that for new construction before a certificate of occupancy is issued, that the water testing must meet federal drinking water standards. And as a practical matter, I don't think there's any chance that this is going to meet that. But setting that aside, since it's a Board of Health regulation, the other issues we have most pertain to title again and this easement that benefits Mr. Thaler's property. We mentioned it the last time, but again, they cannot unilaterally relocate this easement. They either need a court order or they need Mr. Thaler's written consent. And they haven't even approached him for that. So the fact that they're proposing this plan that shows an alternative easement access, it really can't be done without a court order first. And second of all, I see that it's proposed to be vegetated and with beach grass, and that it can just be repaired if the beach grass is ruined during Mr. Thaler's nourishment of his bank. And the problem with that is the easement agreement provides currently that Mr. Thaler is responsible for repairing the easement. He did not agree to have this vegetated. He did not negotiate to have this vegetated. And in fact, the easement specifies that there will be large rubber mats placed on the easement and large piles of sand put on the easement and heavy machinery going across the easement. So I can only imagine that this activity will destroy the proposed beach grass and that will have to be replanted. And that is not something Mr. Thaler negotiated for nor agreed to in the easement agreement. So those are our other title issues. And then the one other thing that I believe the commission requested was an alternatives analysis, and I haven't seen that either. I know they did make some adjustments to the project, but I haven't seen an alternatives analysis, and I think that would be helpful.
Hillary, if you could comment on the Board of Health issue with the water.
So it depends on which parameter you're looking at, but the Board of Health, as far as salinity is concerned, goes with 2,000 milligrams per liter. So that's a pretty high level of sodium that the Board of Health considers as acceptable.
And could you—
I'd like to comment on—
Excuse me. We'll get right back to you, but could you comment on the title issue also? Is that something that it's not?
I don't think that we can
address.
get involved in the title issue. That seems like it's landowner to landowner through your attorneys. So I don't know that we're going to weigh in on that matter.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jen.
Thank you. So in terms of the beach grass in that vegetated area, if matting is to be laid down over it, not only will that offer the culms and the root material some protection, but if there's also additional sand that goes in there, beach grass is a species that grows in coastal dunes. It is well adapted to changing conditions and to the addition and subtraction of sand and substrate material. So and not only that, it colonizes and spreads rapidly. And so I really don't think that there, in the very periodic instances that this would be used, I really don't think that there would be any issue in that area being vegetated with beach grass. And if the renourishment process is following the protocol that was just explained with matting and sand, I really think that this area would be pretty fine almost all the time, unless those nourishment activities become very frequent or very excessive. Beach grass is a really hardy native plant. It grows in the toughest conditions that we have. And so I don't think from a vegetation standpoint, there would be an issue with that.
John Kumbler, did you have a question
No, no.
or comment? All right, are there any other questions from the commissioners? Are there any other comments from the public? Ms. Fontaine?
I just have three things I wanted to mention. My parents and my grandparents have been coming down to the cottage since the 20s. And Richard said that the water is undrinkable. You can't use it for anything. And, you know, the water tastes terrible. It always has. You can cook with it. You can shower with it. And it has a lot of minerals, but it is drinkable. And now I'm renting a cottage in the middle of the island, and the water tastes exactly the same. And the second comment was about the rust. He was commenting that his pipes are rusted. Mr. Rice commented on the water tanks rusting out and needing new ones. We live right near the ocean. Everything rusts near the ocean. Hinges, our refrigerator, all the pipes rust. That's just part of living by the ocean.
Mr. Thaler?
Yeah, rather than offering anecdotal commentary, the McDonald's and the Thalers did environmental testing since the last meeting. It's unfortunate that the buyers didn't do the same. And we have found, Hillary makes the point about 2,000. The McDonald's were at 2,400, which is 20% higher than what the health board looks for.
Could you submit your testing results to Hillary, please?
Yeah, we'll have Christine do that. And pH, if your pH is high or low, if it's high, you have more alkalinity, and if it's low, you have more acidity. And acidity is what eats into the pipes as well. And there again, the pH is low, below the recommended standards. And the recommended standards are 6.5 to 8.5, and the pH at my house is 5.78. And as for recommended sodium, it's 20. That's the federal limit. I'm not sure how the town of Wellfleet gets 2,000, but in any case, the testing indicates it's worse.
Okay.
By 20%. So we'll submit that to you. But I would suggest that it's disappointing that the buyers spent all this time focusing on reforestation after they defoliate and changing the plans, but didn't focus on the fundamental question we all have. It's just the doggone water. I mean, we want to be reasonable, but please focus on the water, guys.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thaler. Leon, and then Barbara.
I just wanted to point out that people talking about low pH. I live quite a ways from the bay, and I also have very good water, but it's got a pH of 6.0, and that's easily accommodated by or remedied by a treatment for it. Culligan sells a deionizer. They'll take care of that.
Barbara?
I just want to point out that people are talking about current conditions, but we have no data or science to suggest that things will get worse. They're bad, very bad now. And it seems like the people who live there need to have some kind of remediation in place for their own properties, whether or not this other property gets developed.
Mr. Rice?
Yeah, I would just say the water is undrinkable. You can't make coffee with it. You can't make lemonade with it. You never invite a guest to drink it. You know, it isn't drinkable. But my main question is, do I have any recourse if my well gets drained? I mean, I don't know how broad this aquifer is. By drilling a well so close to mine, I'm really concerned about that. I'm just wondering, you're asking the committee, do I have any recourse if my well gets drained?
I don't think that's something we can comment on. Hillary?
Well, the first step is he would have to prove that it was this dwelling that caused the well to go dry. And what I've heard from Mass DEP and various other folks in the field of water litigation is it's very difficult to pinpoint water issues on one particular property. And I just use that as an example because we had a situation here in town where there was a farm and the farm was very close to the well. And it seemed blatantly obvious that the farm was contaminating the well. And it was impossible, almost impossible to prove that the contamination was coming from the farm and not coming from further up in the aquifer. So I'm not sure that we have a remedy for you, but there are various litigation processes you could use to follow through on that. Not that that's an ideal solution.
I'm sorry, the woman in blue. I've forgotten your name. Go ahead, you had your hand up before?
Me?
No, on my screen, she's above you.
Oh, on my screen, are you talking to me?
Yes, I am.
My hand wasn't up, but I will come back with my hand up.
Okay.
I'm just ready.
Go ahead, please, the other person. I'm sorry, sometimes your names show up, sometimes they don't.
Okay, this is Jeannie Campus. You know, the burden isn't on the neighbors to ensure the water quality and to show no adverse effects. It's on the applicant here, and the applicant hasn't even provided water samples, let alone make any demonstration that this won't harm the other's water supply and the neighboring water supply. And it's really on them and not the neighbors to prove that, you know, it's them. So I think the burden needs to be where it should be, and that is with the applicant. And the Board of Health Regulations may provide for 2,000 milligrams per liter. We have neighbors whose water is in excess of that amount. And in any event, another provision in the regulations, section 510, indicates that when a property is sold or transferred, the water test, quality test is required by the seller and must be provided, and that before a certificate of occupancy is issued, it must meet federal drinking water standards. And federal drinking water standards are not the same as Wellfleet. That's as the local standards of 2000. Federal drinking water standards are only at 20 milligrams per liter. There is no showing here that that's going to even come close to this. I think the commission needs to take that into account and not put it on the neighbors to show this, but put it on the applicant to show that there's a legitimate chance that they could even get a certificate of occupancy, let alone show that there's no adverse impact to the water quality.
Hillary, do you want to comment on that?
No, thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Young.
Just if the normal process for obtaining permission to build a house is you have to provide evidence that you have a potable water supply. If that doesn't happen here, then the process ends. That doesn't change the current conditions. Apparently there's a problem with water quality here on the island. I don't know how to fix that. I will be perfectly honest. I have no idea how to fix the current situation that there is on the island. But I don't think that's a reason for prohibiting someone from redeveloping this existing property. And again, if we dig a test well and take a sample and it doesn't meet the limits that the board requires, then we'll have to go to Plan B.
Why is there a hesitancy to do that? Why hasn't that been done?
It took a while to, when the first attempt in the southeast corner was not successful or not ideal anyway. And we had to look for some other location. We had to first research existing septic systems on abutting properties. And so that took a while. And once that was done, and I was confident that the distances between the proposed well and the proposed septic system would, meet the required separation from existing wells and septic systems. Then I handed it off to the well driller, and then he applied for the permit. and that takes time. So it's just there hasn't been any hesitancy. It takes time.
When will that be done?
Sometime next week is what is expected to be the schedule.
Would you be willing to continue until after the water test results come back?
I really don't think that is relevant for the Conservation Commission's decision on the project. So I would rather not continue based on the results of a water test for our own drinking well.
All right. Are there any other comments from the commissioners? What would you like to do? Speaking to the commissioners.
I think this water issue is a concern. I think this is a significantly bigger structure that's going to have a significantly bigger impact on water, and I'm concerned.
Barbara?
I'm not sure about what our responsibility is here. Suppose that we permit this project and then the water tests show that it's not a habitable situation. What happens then? Or suppose that we don't permit it and the water test shows that the water is fine. What goes?
Whether we permit it or not, we cannot change the results of the water test, and the water test will be whatever it is, and the Board of Health will deal with that, and the building inspector will deal with that and indicate whether they can go forward.
Okay.
Leon, do you have concerns?
Well, this clearly is a gray area as far as puts and takes, but I think that there has to be science behind any change in the water quality since it's been degrading consistently. And it sounds like none of the houses on Lieutenant Island will be able to be sold if they can't have water over 20 milligrams per liter.
John Portnoy?
I'm not sure that we have evidence that conditions of, actual numbers to show that conditions have gotten worse. Conditions are bad, given the water quality results that we have. The water quality is really bad. And just looking at, the at Lieutenant Island on the quad sheet, and I can understand why. It's just very tenuous out there to get good quality groundwater. The question in my mind, though, is as far as our decision, I'm not sure that it really makes a difference in terms of, relative to the new house versus the old house. There's bad water quality. There's going to be bad water quality. We don't know that it's gotten progressively worse. So I just don't see our decision really affecting the water quality out there.
Ben?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking about how the in terms of how we look at it in terms of occupancy, like occupancy and use of the property in terms of septic is going to be the same regardless of the size of the house. And so I guess the issue that I come to is the size of the house affecting stormwater. So I would be interested in seeing that just the water, using rainwater, stormwater for the drainage. I'd be interested in either having that as a condition or actually like seeing that in the plan. But that's really the only thing I see.
Leon?
I guess it gets down to the basic question is, if the water quality does change, is that an environmental problem? Because our charter is to protect the environment.
Hillary, do you want to speak to that?
I don't think I have much more to say on the water quality issue.
I think, Leon, it would be hard to show that it was due to this particular development and not just general circumstances or something.
I agree, but I mean, even if, I'm just trying to separate out that at its worst, is it something that we make a decision based on? Our decision is on water penetration through the quality and number of plants that are on it and the effect on the shoreline. But are we concerned with the potability of the water?
I think it's a matter of how this proposal would affect the water quality. And, you know, as I said prior, that it's a 3-bedroom going to a 3-bedroom. So in essence, there's no change. Now, folks want to say that because the dwelling is larger, the bedrooms are larger, there's a more intense use, thus creating the potential for a different effect at the end. But, you know, that's not what the regulations say. So the regulations govern water use based on the number of bedrooms. And I think if we venture out of that, then we get into a gray area and we lose sight of what the regulation tells us to do. So we've looked at a lot of different properties over time, and we always go back to the number of bedrooms, not the size of the dwelling.
Right. It's too bad we don't have a water meter on all these houses to actually tell us how many gallons, you know.
Yeah.
We don't. And
I think what you'd find is that folks generally don't come close to their Title V flow. I mean, that's generally what we see on metered houses.
Right.
I guess my comments are the following. It's a 3-bedroom house replacing a 3-bedroom house. They have the right to replace the house. The water quality has been an issue out there for clearly a long, long time. There's no indication that this house will cause greater disturbance to the water quality, especially if we use a condition not allowing water to be used for irrigation, but requiring only rainwater and runoff to be used. As to the title issues and the easement, that's not within our purview. I understand that's a concern and that's a problem, but that's not something the Conservation Commission addresses. For that reason, I would ask for a motion.
this is Barbara, and I move that we approve the NOI for Mandel Family Realty Trust with those conditions about watering, 90% survival of plants, replanting plants if they don't survive, rather than using more water, using stormwater, rain water, etc.
Could I just ask? Oh, I'll ask after you vote.
John,
I have a question. Just to clarify, so the condition is that groundwater will not be used for irrigation, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I'll second that.
Can I have a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Can I have a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Is this considered a new building or?
Yes, yes, we have yes.
Can we put that in?
Yes.
Yes.
Because I don't want it to be.
Yep.
We did the new dwelling and the no seawall,
Yes.
no CES. All right, are you ready to vote?
Yes, I vote no.
Okay, but I need to call on you, so we have your vote
Oh, I'm
recorded
sorry, I
by
thought-
name. That's all right. Barbara Brennicell, how do you vote?
yes.
Leon Shreve,
Yes.
John Portnoy,
Yes.
Ben Fairbank,
Yes.
John Kumbler,
No.
Michael Fisher,
Yes.
and Debbie Freeman, yes. Okay.
Can I ask one question on the conditions?
Yes.
If we are in a drought situation, can water be trucked in for irrigation?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Okay.
I anticipate that the lawyers will go ahead and do whatever they want to do on this, and I would really recommend, as much as I can, that you talk to each other about the easement and see if you can work that out and the water issues. Stephanie, I would ask you to supply us with the results of your water test.
Okay. Can I ask a quick question on the condition about stating that this is a new house as opposed to a reconstruction? Why is this considered new and not a replacement?
Under our regulations, if you look at them, this is a newly constructed house. This is not replacing a prior dwelling. The prior dwelling was destroyed.
And it was at a different location, a different footprint. This is in a completely different location. It's a brand new construction.
Okay, but as far as the legal prohibition from doing a shorefront protection in the future, I just questioned that, but that's fine.
Well, that's what it's going to be. No coastal engineering structures permitted. It's not considered a pre-1979 dwelling.
78.
78, sorry.
Someone asked the question earlier. I'm sorry for jumping in, but you switched over to the vote before I had a chance to.
Can we just finish up before we take another comment from the audience, please?
Yes.
Debbie, we need a supervisor.
Okay, who would like to supervise this project?
I'll be the supervisor.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. It's very complicated with all the plant stuff, so that's why I didn't volunteer.
That's great that Ben will do it. Okay, your comment now, please.
Someone asked the question before, and I don't believe it was answered, whether there's a basement for this house. Is there a basement?
Stephanie, do you want to
Yes.
answer?
Yes.
Yes.
Under a portion of it.
All right, so there is, in addition to the house, there is a basement. We do not have a map of the aquifer. And it is conceivable that with the basement, we're going to be redirecting that. Is there some way of looking into that?
We're not gonna entertain this. I mean, we need science in order to talk about this, and you have no science to present.
I think that is sort of science. And can
you
you
need an expert to say where the aquifer is, what the depth is, and what impact, if anything, there would be? I can't allow idle speculation, even though it may be correct. It's
no,
just
I'm not speculating. I'm suggesting that it's
okay. We've voted on this matter, and I'm going to cut off debate at this point and go on to the next matter.
All right.
Thank you all very much for your time.
Okay, so Form 5, order of conditions.
Yes, please.
Okay.
All right, Sheets is the next one, and I understand that's been continued.
Yes.
Do we need a motion to?
Yes, please.
All right, could I have a motion to continue Sheets 125 Marvin Way, map 21, parcel 26, the NOI for tree removal, repair walkways, expand deck, construct small platform, removal of trees, and pruning for view corridor?
So moved, Barbara.
Second, John.
Okay, and I need a voice vote on that. How do you vote? Leon?
Yes.
John Portnoy?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
John Kubler?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And Debbie, yes. Okay. The next matter is Booza 40 Weedamoo Way, map 29, parcel 417, a certificate of compliance. Hillary, is anyone here for that?
I have absolutely no idea, and I have no idea what the work was for because we had no original file.
This is Paula. This is Paula Dadman. I'm speaking on behalf of Mr. Booza. I'm from Ocean View Realty. Currently, the property is under agreement, and the closing has already been extended once because of title issue. And in order to rectify the title and satisfy the buyer's attorney and lender, we need to have a certificate of compliance to record.
Okay, what work was done on this property?
This is, oh, you don't have a copy of the certificate of compliance? It was, boy.
We have a copy of the request for certificate of compliance, but it does not describe any type of work that was done.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had a copy of it. Findings, the Wellfleet Conservation Commission has reviewed the notice of intent, has held a public hearing, and the commission has determined that the area on which the proposed work is to be done is significant to the following interests: prevention of pollution. So all I've had, this is all I have here is what was put on record. And
That's not enough for us to know what's been done, unfortunately. We can't issue a certificate of compliance unless we know what was applied for and then can see what was done. Michael, do you have any way you could help us by looking at any minutes on this?
I looked back, but it's before the records that I have.
I believe it was,
predates that.
I'm sorry, I believe it was for construction
Construction of what?
of the home that's currently there.
Okay, we need not just a belief, we need to know what it was.
Okay, and how am I meant to find that if I don't have any records of
Then
it?
you need to bring in the property owner and have the property owner tell us what it was.
And what date?
Go ahead.
And shouldn't there be a plan somewhere or?
So if it was for construction of a dwelling, we could look for a building plan or a building permit, but we don't have a conservation record of it. So we need to know what to look for at least.
It might be at the Registry of Deeds as well.
The only thing I have is from the Registry of Deeds is the order of conditions.
Well,
What is it?
that doesn't help us because we can't issue a certificate of compliance unless we know exactly what was done. John Portnoy.
Yeah, why does this person need a certificate of compliance if we have no record of the town issuing a permit?
The town probably did issue the order of conditions if it's recorded. We just don't have a folder for it.
Oh, I see.
So
But perhaps the property owner could detail what work was done, and we could seek out a building permit file to see what the building plans looked like if it was indeed for a building construction. But
it was for a building construction.
Do you know when?
I'm gonna find out though.
We should do a site visit to see what's there and what was built.
Okay. Is that, tell me what I need to tell them to do. I know that the house was constructed. There was another portion of land that was, so it was initially for lots on Ridge and Fifth Avenue. And now
they have plans. Perhaps the owner might have a record that we do not have, or we will look at the building department, but we need to know when the construction took place. So we have some way of knowing what we may or may not have.
Okay, so you just need the year that it took place?
Well, if there are plans, that would really help. If they have any of the filings they submitted to the commission, copies of that, that would really help. I have no idea what time frame we're talking about.
Okay, so the owners are elderly and have moved into a smaller place. I have absolutely no idea if they have any of these records available to them, which is why they're selling the property. They live outside of the country, outside of the state, across the country here. So what else would I need to be able to get for you? Or what can I do to be able to effectively, this was effective as of 1987.
So we need to be able to look through the building department files and see if we have a building permit and see what that was for and see if that aligns with what your client believes they did at that time. So, you know, we generally request a letter from an engineer certifying that the work was done in compliance, or
right,
a land surveyor, just depending on what the job was. But we have nothing, we have absolutely nothing. So we can't issue a certificate of compliance with nothing. We need something.
All right. Well, I need to know what exactly it is that you want, so you're looking for some building plans, or you're going to also check in the building department for for the building permit? Or I need to do that?
No, we will do that.
Okay. And then you'll do a site visit?
Well, first we need to determine if we have the plan. So why don't you ring us in a few days and we'll see if we have a plan or something. But confirm with your client that it was for construction of a brand new dwelling, please.
Oh, it was for construction of a brand new dwelling.
Oh, may I jump in here?
Yes.
I believe it had to do with the installation of the septic
Excuse me,
system.
would you please state your name?
Pam McNulty.
Okay, go ahead, please.
I believe it was because of the septic installation.
Okay, well, that's different than a dwelling. So in any case, I don't think we can issue this tonight, so I'd hate to spend more time going back and forth on what we think it may have been. Let's all do a little research and reconvene on this matter because we're not going to be able to issue it this evening anyway.
Okay, so what, do we need to continue that? What do we do, Hillary?
I would continue it to 12/16.
Okay, could I have a motion to continue, please?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, I need a voice vote. Barbara? Yes. Leon?
Yes.
John Portnoy?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
Michael?
Recuse, trust is a butter.
John Kumbler?
Yes.
And Debbie, yes. All right, the next matter is Black 85 Chequesset Bluff Road, map 19, parcel 138, an RDA for septic upgrade. Is there anyone here for that?
Yes, this is Jason Ellis representing Richard Black. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
So this project is really simple. They currently have a cesspool that they're using that's within the 100-foot buffer zone to the top of the coastal bank, and we're looking to upgrade with a new septic system farther to the north out of the resource area with an IA system, a nitrogen reducing system. So the only work that we're actually doing in the buffer zone is eliminating the cesspool, pumping it and filling it, and then piping out of the buffer zone to the new septic system. So it's very simple, very little disturbance. And that's it.
Okay, does anybody have a question from the commission? Could I have a motion, please?
I move that we accept this.
Is there a second?
Barbara, yes.
Okay, and Barbara, your vote?
Yes.
Leon?
Yes.
John Portnoy?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
John Kumbler?
I'm saying yes because it has the nitrogen reduction system. Yes.
Michael Fisher?
Yes.
And Debbie, yes. So that's all set.
Form 2?
Thank you.
Yes, determination of applicability.
Could I ask what negative that is? 2, 3?
Buffer zone.
Pardon me?
It's in the buffer zone.
So is that a 2 or 3?
Yep.
Which form is it again?
Form determination of applicability.
Okay, thank you.
All right, the Mary Ring Trust and William and Beth Meister, 265 and 295 King Philip Road, map 34, parcel and map 35, parcel 198, a notice of intent to remove and prune selected trees for view corridor. Is anyone here for that?
Hey, this is Charles Wentz with Ponderosa Landscaping. Guess you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Let's see, we brought this before, so you have some idea what's going on. We were proposing to improve the view corridor that goes through 2 lots. And we have the permission letter from the Meisters to remove trees from his property, their property. It's suggested to remove 12 pitch pines and 2 black locusts and reduce the crown height of 7 trees that are on the left as you look at the water. The reduction of the amount of pines is relatively minimal to how many pines are on the lot. And we propose to plant 70 shrubs and for understory mitigation in areas on both properties with a temporary irrigation system. Yeah, with some, the alternative is we could reduce the height of some of the trees if that is preferable. Does anybody have any questions? I can answer other information. We plant native plants. We thought it's just about 5-to-1 ratio. We thought that was pretty generous. Any thoughts?
I just want to mention that the pines that you promote, that you want to reduce the crown height, they almost look like lollipops. And I don't know what's going to happen when you reduce the crown, what's going to be left there, and whether that's a habitat or resource that's going to have any value, and whether there's a different way of dealing with this. I don't have a problem with removing the pitch pines from the Meister property and doing mitigation planting there, because that's pretty heavily vegetated already.
Yeah.
But those are really big pine trees. And I don't envision what's going to happen if you just remove the crown on those.
I think Bartlett tree would do the work, and I think they would do the correct selective pruning of the material to leave enough branches to keep the trees going, and do it in the right time of year for the insect problems. If that helps answer that.
John Portnoy, did you have questions?
Yeah, I have a question about this removal of 9 trees on the adjacent property is
Right.
apparently to create a window through the canopy to the marsh. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
in that case, we would like to see, as others have said, a replacement with a real shrub border that doesn't exist along that edge at all. And I see that you're planning on planting viburnum, Comptonia, bayberry, and some rose.
And viburnum, right.
Yeah, but those, actually, you could plant some shrubs and small trees that would be, native species suitable appropriate for that site, that would not ever interfere with the view because the deck is so high. So I would suggest you add things like shad and bare oak there.
I like the shad idea.
Well, bare
and
oak,
another one would be serviceberry, winterberry.
Winterberry.
So maybe
Why
those.
not? Why not bare oak?
Let's see, what's the Latin name for that one?
Ilicifolia, Quercus ilicifolia.
Yeah, we could do that. Let's substitute some of those for the, we have a lot of bayberry, maybe some of the viburnums could be reduced. I could come up with a new list.
Yeah, our objective is I hope you understand, Charles, our objective is to create a dense shrub border, and there it could be 15 feet tall and still not obstruct the view.
Yep, and the winterberry and Amelanchier would do that very well.
I would like to see plants put in that will not require thinning, topping, or cutting in the future.
Yeah.
So that the area will not be disturbed again.
Yep, that's the object with this also. Right, correct.
Are there other comments? Hillary, would be acceptable for you if Charles presents you with a substitute planting plan that includes those other plants?
Yep.
Okay,
Great.
could I have a motion?
This is Michael. I move that we approve the Mary Ring Trust and William and Beth Miser proposals 265, 295 Kings Philip Road for an NOI.
Okay, is there a second?
Leon
Second.
seconds.
All right, I need a voice vote. Barbara,
Yes.
Leon,
Yes.
John Portnoy,
Yes.
Ben,
Yes.
John Kumbler,
Yes.
Michael Fisher,
Yes.
and Debbie, yes. All right,
You need a survival and an irrigation plan. What goes along with this? Because it's an NOI.
We want a survival rate on the plantings.
Charles, you want to
I would
speak?
think 90% would be doable.
And how, will there be any irrigation required?
Yes, I suggest the drip irrigation from the house. Like with a battery run timer that would be above ground.
And how long would that stay in? Would that be kept there forever or only?
No, I would think 3 years.
Okay.
Because the plant should adapt well by then.
Are there any other questions?
Supervisor?
I will, I'm there all the time, so I'll agree to supervise that one. Barbara.
Okay, did we vote on this? I don't believe, or did
No.
we?
When will this be done, Charles? Time
I
frame?
think we will probably try to prune in this before March this year, if things go correctly up, but I'll keep in touch with Hillary about the scheduling. And then we plant soon after that.
Okay, I'm the supervisor, so you would contact me when you begin so I could be out there
Okay.
just to see.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we need to vote on this. Hillary, do you need any more information for the conditions?
No, I have it all.
Okay. Barbara, how do you vote?
Yes.
Leon?
Yes.
John Portnoy?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
John Kumbler?
Yes.
Michael Fisher?
Yes.
And Debbie, yes. Okay. The last public hearing of the evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stewart, 240
Thank
Bay
you.
Lane, map 41, parcel 127, and RDA. Install 3 retaining walls, install steel edge around perimeter of base of deck, remove existing brick landings at rear of house and replace with stepping stones. Install stepping stones, stone steps, dig holes at base of downspouts, fill with gravel, seed all disturbed areas, and mitigate and vegetate. Is anyone here for Stewart?
Yes, Charles from Ponderosa Landscaping, Charles Wentz.
Okay, do you want to talk about this project, please?
Sure. The site had a new septic system put in, and I had talked about mitigation plans for that at one point. This is a follow-up of that. Doesn't relate very much. We propose to do a stepping stone path from the front door area around the house with steps going down the slope to the backyard, to the back under the deck. There's a fair amount of, I'd call it erosion going on, and we'd like to really mitigate that problem. There's not much vegetation in certain areas, and I think the gravel under the deck will help keep the sand contained and not go down the slope. We propose to put a steel edge around under the deck to contain the gravel, and 3 small walls, like 8 feet, 6 feet, and 4 feet. Do a minimal amount of work there to just keep that elevation under control so it's not as steep, because there's a fair amount of soil issues right there, and I think the retaining wall will help that. Just dry laid on gravel, field stone, just to hold the soil back. And I think it'll help a lot on the downspouts to dig holes to make little dry wells for the any rainwater that comes down from the downspouts. For the planning, let's see. There's, I think, 25 or 30 shrubs, and didn't have the whole total on the plan. And some beach grass around the existing septic. We'll use native plants again with a irrigation off the house, temporary above ground drip system for 3 years. For the footprint, there's relatively little drainage problem issues as far as I'm concerned about the pathway going down the slope. We're going to be removing some brick that's under the deck and just replace it with stepping stones with 4 to 6 inch gaps to allow water to go through there. Any questions?
Are there questions from the commission?
I think it's a modest project. I think we can go ahead and approve it if no one has questions or concerns.
John Kumbler?
I was going to say exactly what Barbara just said. I think we should okay this. It's pretty mild, impact.
Hillary, do we need a survival rate and irrigation?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think we could do the 90% and then the irrigation 3 years with a drip, temporary, above ground.
If this is an RDA, who's checking on all that though?
We can.
Okay, thank you.
Could I have a motion, please?
I move that we accept this proposal.
Could I have a second?
Second.
Barbara, how do you vote?
Yes.
Leon?
Yes.
John Portnoy?
Yes.
Ben?
Yes.
John Kumbler?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
And Debbie, yes. Okay.
Debbie, before we totally go off, what form do we sign for the Mary Ring Trust, the Miser property? And what form do we sign for this?
Order of conditions for Mary Ring, and this is determination of applicability.
Okay.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, then we will go to the business meeting portion of tonight. And before I start on that, I just want to reiterate that the commission is in the process of redoing its regulations. And if you have comments on any area that you think should be covered by the regulations, or you wish to comment on the existing regulations, please submit those to Hillary Liebenberg. Hillary in writing. I'm sorry, I really botched your name. Okay, the business meeting normally is open pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 38, Sections 18 through 25, as amended by Chapter 28 of the Acts of 2009, the Wetlands Protection Act, and the Wellfleet Environmental Bylaw and its regulations, subject to Governor Baker's continuing orders on open meeting and remote meetings. However, tonight, I want to say that it should be noted that the request before the Commission for an emergency certification is opened pursuant to the Wetland Protection Act only. And nothing determined today is related to the pending litigation with the applicant for the emergency certification, and therefore the pending litigation shall not be considered when evaluating the request for emergency work, as any determination made today will not be considered in the pending litigation. Amy, did I get that correct?
You did, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I would go right to Poland trustee, 1440 Chequesset Neck Road, map 18, parcel 7, emergency certification, proposed shorefront protection. Are there representatives here to speak on that?
Madam Chairwoman, this is Ben Zender. I'm on the line. I hope you all can hear me okay.
We can.
Okay, thank you. And hello, everybody. And hello, Amy. This is, and also there should be on the line with me, I'd like to just make sure, is Nate Jones from Coastal Engineering is here to address questions regarding the structure. Seth Wilkinson from Wilkinson Ecological is on the line to address questions about the work itself that's being proposed. Don Monroe is here from Coastal as well to address questions. And John Harrison, who is our civil engineer, is here to address questions about the house and the structure itself. So what's before you right now is a request for an emergency certification under 310 CMR 10.06. We have submitted to the town a written request, which then went to the DEP, came back to the town for a local determination. We met at the site today with members of the commission, and I thank you for going out there to look at it. I know the commission had a number of questions about the request. And so if you don't mind, what I'd like to do is just go right to Seth to describe the construction itself, what the proposal is, and then we can try to respond to any questions the board may have about other aspects of the application. Would that be okay, Madam Chairwoman?
That is.
Okay, great. Okay, Seth, would you mind just giving the commission just a brief description of the proposal?
Sure, certainly. For the record, Seth Wilkinson, certified ecological restoration practitioner of Wilkinson Ecological Design. Essentially what is proposed is a similar footprint to what my company has, into where my company has nourished this in two occasions in last year in 2019. So at the bottom or the toe of the coastal bank, there would be 3 foot high by 4 foot wide cylindrical envelopes. They're made out of 100% biodegradable coconut fiber, woven coconut fiber. And they're stacked on top of each other. And then they have wooden posts every 8 feet along the seaward edge. Those would stick about 2 to 3 feet out of the beach. Those envelopes would be essentially set within the about 6 inches down into the existing beach elevation. The first one's built sort of at the beach elevation, and then the next 2 are built on top of it, battered back along the embankment. So overall height off the existing beach is going to be about 8.5 feet. The envelopes are made by just filling these blankets with the same sand that we've used in the past for sand nourishment, and then they're stitched together with biodegradable coir rope. Then when complete, they're covered with sand again. So when it's done, it will look comparable to the sand nourishment that has been done previously. And the reason we're proposing this is, given the amount of erosion that's occurred while we've been actively nourishing this embankment, it's not lasted the entire winter. In fact, it was done twice in 2019. First in the spring and then through the summer and then the following fall. Our concern is that given that it's not lasting the entire winter, that at this point, the home and the foundation of the home, which is helical piers, which I'm sure you'll hear about from the engineers, is now so close that if we lose the sand and then the bank erodes any further back, we're concerned that the structural integrity of the dwelling will be compromised. So when you encapsulate this sand in a coconut fiber blanket, it tends to resist the moderate storms. Functionally, these are sandbags. It's not a permanent intervention by any stretch. I would estimate the design life to be 2 to 3 years at this location at the maximum. They could deflate in any considerable storm, but they're apt to hold on to the sand longer than just hold the sand in place longer than just stacking up the sand as we have done in past nourishment treatments. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I'll start. You did not, no renourishment was done on this property since November of 2019?
I believe that was the last, yes, that was the last intervention, yeah.
How much sand will be placed on the property, including the sand in the rolls and the sand covering it?
It would be in the neighborhood of 1,000 to 1,500 cubic yards. It would be less than previously.
How many of the stakes will be placed along the 241-foot length?
I believe that would be about 30 stakes.
And how deep are they put in?
About 4 to 5 feet.
Well, I was under the impression that they are 12 feet long and that 2 to 3 feet would be showing. I don't understand that.
Let me check the spec. It's true that about 2 to 3 feet would be up top. And I'm sorry, I misread the spec on that. I was reading 8 feet rather than 12 feet. So yeah, they'd be driven down about 8 or 9 feet.
How are they driven down?
Just pushed down with the same equipment that makes the compact equipment that the envelopes are made with, a little like Bobcat type equipment and mini excavator. So the mini excavator just pushes it down. They have a chisel point at the bottom and they're just pushed down. Not driven or anything like with a pile driver or anything like that. No hydraulic installation, nothing like that.
Okay. Are there questions from other commission members on this portion of the proposal? Leon?
What's to stop the sand that's going to be covering these tubes from eroding away just as the replenishment sand did?
Nothing. It would behave exactly the same. But the envelopes are what would be supporting the structural integrity of the bank behind it.
So realistically, people walking along that beach will see these tubes without, right? I mean,
after the sand washes away, that would be correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Is there another way to anchor the quar envelopes in place besides using the pilings? Could you use some type of a cabling system like we've seen you use elsewhere?
That's a good question, Hillary. The challenge with cables are that the best analogy I can think of is like a cheese slicer, like when you slice cheese with a wire. The sand, when it's placed inside of the envelope, is heavy and dense, and if that envelope starts to move and a 1/4 inch cable or even a 3/8 inch cable, which is about the biggest cable we'd ever use, will just slice through the coconut fiber, unlike the fiber rolls, which are not nearly as heavy and can be really cinched down. So I'm not aware of any other anchoring technique. The other thing that the posts help with is they keep the bottom sort of in place. But if ice is encountered, I know it'll help to make the ice ride up over the envelopes. Whether or not we'll see ice this winter is, we'll see. We didn't see much last winter, but primarily it's just to help tow in the bottom.
Barbara? Is there any contingency plan if these envelopes get dislocated and start moving onto adjacent or onto that property or into the water for their removal? We've seen some pretty nice underwater depictions of these sit at the bottom of Cape Cod Bay, other projects that roll the water and still there. I'm wondering, what's the plan if they move on adjacent properties or even onto the property, moving into the water?
Sure. So to be clear, this is fabric. It's not fibrils, and so it can be picked up by hand and moved around, sort of like a tarp, I guess, like a biodegradable tarp. They also biodegrade much more quickly than like a fibril would, which is much denser. Fibril's 20 inches of dense packed coconut fiber, whereas this is about a ½ inch thick woven material. So when we use this, we use this in salt marsh restorations frequently. So in an in-water situation, so the tide comes in every day and inundates it, they just naturally break down over a 2 to 3 year period. So as far as, if it were to become storm-borne debris, unlike people's stairways and wooden structures that take quite a while to break down that are still biodegradable, these break down quickly. But certainly if they started to move, they could be easily cleaned up by hand or with the assistance of a small piece of equipment, depending on how much was moving. So certainly it's very, very easy to clean up.
Debbie, I have 2 questions.
Please go ahead, Michael.
Let me
All right.
just follow up. You would have to have access to neighboring properties in order to do that, like the seashore or town property. If it moved either way, you have to have access to those properties, clean it up. And
I think if it, I presume if it washed, it would be into a public area where you could clean it. I mean, people walk those beaches all the time, so that's likely where it's not likely to end up going up the bank.
Right. Barbara, for some reason you're breaking up. We're having difficulty hearing you.
I don't know what's happening.
That's better.
Can I ask my questions, Michael?
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, 2 questions. First, the stairway down to the beach caused a great deal of erosion. Are the owners going to replace that stairway, which would mean even more erosion?
I don't know the answer to that. I know this has been a seasonal stairway, which was just removed in the last few weeks. But I don't know the slope angles, if they could even support that next summer. That's not part of this request.
Could it be made an order of conditions not to put this stairway on top of this?
Michael, in an emergency certification, I don't believe we attach conditions. Amy, could you tell me if I'm correct?
You are correct. And so with regard to this emergency certification, if the commission wants to consider this option, then after the fact notice of intent has to be filed. It's my understanding from Attorney Zender that is already being prepared. With regard to the emergency certification, if I may, the first step is a site visit has to be done, which it's my understanding has been done. I know that both Hillary and myself have already been out there. We were out there last week. And the second step is that this commission has to determine if there is an emergency. The only thing that this commission has to go on is the filing in front of them, is the documents in front of them. The building inspector was not confident that there was an emergency, so he did not declare an emergency. Hillary, as the health agent, did not declare an emergency because there was no threat to the septic system or water supply. So once the commission if the commission determines there is an emergency situation, the next step is to determine what is needed to abate the emergency. There is DEP case law where the commission, allowed work, and DEP came in and said they didn't need all of that work just to abate the emergency. So essentially, you have to determine what is the work that's necessary to abate the emergency. The one thing that I did just want to point out, it's my understanding that the property owner has a outstanding order of conditions allowing the nourishment. So the nourishment is not necessarily part of this, and so the nourishment can go on. So if the commission feels that there's not necessarily an emergency but something needs to be done, this nourishment can continue to happen. It can also continue to happen even if this soft solution is allowed under emergency circumstances. They can still go in and nourish. So the nourishment is always going to be there. So if the commission determines that, step one, there is an emergency, and step two, that the requested work is necessary to abate the emergency, then an emergency certification can issue, and a notice of intent, an after the fact notice of intent, will need to be filed, and that will be filed like any other notice of intent. So it would be a public hearing, notices would go out, et cetera. There would be conditions, et cetera. So,
Amy, when you say we're confined to the materials that have been filed, if we have questions about that, for example, the engineer, hearing from the engineer about his calculation of the pounds and the indication that there are certain pilings that are in danger, are we allowed to consider that, or are we not allowed to consider that?
No, you are. My point was that we don't have that. My point was that when the building inspector went out there, he didn't have enough to declare. So we don't have an opinion from the town because the building inspector was not comfortable in determining A, whether there was an emergency, and B, whether the requested project would abate that emergency, because that obviously is a Conservation Commission question. And again, same with Hillary as the health agent. There was no emergency with her wearing the health department hat, not any other hat. So that was my point. Was the information that we have is the information in front of us. But yes, you can definitely look into all of this information in front of you and ask questions, definitely. And the site visit, you would take into consideration what you saw at the site visit.
Madam Chairwoman.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ben, just the commissioner raised his hand first, and then I'll call on you. Okay?
Thank you.
Leon?
I guess the first question to deal with is how do we determine that there's a ecological emergency? I mean, we're looking at it from the environment standpoint. So how do we, if the DP or DEP doesn't think it's an emergency and it's not an emergency from health, what's our criteria?
So just to clarify, DEP did not necessarily determine whether there was an emergency or not. DEP declined to determine if there was an emergency or not, and they have sent it back to the town to determine whether there was an emergency or not. An emergency certification shall. This is in 10.062, because as Debbie indicated, this is only under the Wetland Protection Act. It states that emergency certification shall be issued only for the protection of public health and safety. So that is the parameter that you are under.
Ben?
Yeah, thank you. We're wandering into the legal territory. Just to go back, to kind of pave where we are, we made a request to this board on November 9th for an emergency certification, or your department you know, the 10.06 says that either the conservation agent or your board can make that certification. There was no certification, so we submitted to the DEP.
Would you agree that that was a national holiday that day? The
You asked me
24 hours?
to agree whether something was a national holiday. I'll agree to that. Yeah, I
Yeah,
understand.
so there was no one available to make that certification.
Well, look, I'm not here to debate when we filed it. I'm just laying the groundwork for where we are. We made that request. We then, after 24 hours, made a request to the DEP. The DEP came out and did a site visit and then communicated back via email and asked if we had asked if any agent of the town, other agent, i.e. a health agent or a building inspector, had made the determination. So we reached out to the town for that determination. It's back in front of you now, but I'm a little concerned with Amy's comments because the building inspector has never responded to our request in any way, shape, or form. He came to the site visit. He didn't say a whole lot, but he may have communicated to Amy what his opinion was, but there has been no determination by the building inspector either way. Similarly, the DEP has taken no action at all that I'm aware of, other than asking whether or not the town has considered the request through its other agents. And so I think this brings us back to Mr. Fisher's comments, which I think are right on the money. It's up to your board or your commission to determine whether or not there's a public safety emergency or a hazard to the public safety. But those statements about either the DEP or the building inspector finding or not finding an emergency, I don't think is properly before this board. I think we bear the burden of coming in and showing that there's an emergency with our submission, which you already have, and answering the questions that we're trying to do.
No, I think the only reason to look at them is to say, has it been declared by anyone else?
Yeah, that's all I was trying to get at. I agree. I agree with Attorney Zender. That's all. All I was trying to say was nobody else has determined it.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Hillary.
Do we know how much erosion the property has experienced since our last site visit, which would have been the MIPA site visit?
I'm going to throw that back to Nate and see if he can answer that question, Hillary, if you don't mind, or Debbie, if you don't mind.
Do we have an answer to that?
This is Nate Jones, Coastal Engineering. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I forget exactly when the MIPA site visit was, but we have a survey done from 2018, which is shown on the site plan, the top of the bank location, and that was September 18. And then we also have another survey that was done in August of 2020. So that was probably after the site visit, the MIPA site visit. And the distance the bank eroded in that 2-year span was between 12 and 14 feet. So 6 to 7 feet per year.
I guess I was looking to see what it looked like after the nourishment, because when we were standing out there, it didn't look like a whole lot had changed. It actually looked better than when we were out there a year ago.
Well, between the two surveys that we have completed from September 18 to August 2020, 6,000 yards of nourishment were placed, I believe. Yeah, 6,000 yards, and the bank still receded up to 15 feet.
Well, it's receding at 6 or 7 feet a year, correct?
Correct, with the nourishment that has been placed out there.
Hillary, does that answer your question?
No, I don't think it does, because what I'm looking at doesn't look the line. No, I guess what I wanted to see was what it looked like before the nourishment. So sometime in 2019, after the nourishment was done.
Do you have any photographs of that? Or any measurements relating to that?
I believe what Nate just provided would qualify, because the most recent survey was done after both nourishments.
Yeah, that's the only like topographical information that I have. I may have some photos buried, from when the nourishment was placed, but it's tough to get, to get an idea just from pictures. That's why we do the topographical surveys, but we only get out there, when we can.
Hillary, what is your concern?
No, I just wanted to see what it looked like after the nourishment, sometime in between 2018 and 2020, because when I was standing there, it looked the angle of repose looked nice. The top of the bank wasn't being undercut. And it didn't seem as relative. It didn't seem like there had been that much erosion since the last time I was out there. And I understand you dumped 6,000 cubic yards of sand. So I was just curious about what it would have looked like on the topographical map.
Madam Chairwoman,
Yes, Ben.
if you don't mind, I'd like to ask Nate to describe for the board the nature of the top of the bank right now as we look at it today. And I would point the board to our initial submission to the board, page 11 and 14 in the PDF of the emergency certification application. Nate, would you mind just describing for the board the action at the top of the bank now as you observed it today?
Yeah, so for those that weren't able to get to the site visit, there are some site photos that were submitted with the emergency cert application. And some of the photos were from the perspective of the bottom of the bank looking up. And you can see across the entire property and even to the properties on either side, there's a significant undercut of the bank where the scarp is vertical, from 6 to up to 10 feet of vertical portions of the scarp before you hit the top of the bank. So the emergency situation that we have in front of us is that portion of the undercut scarp could fall at any minute. And there actually are signs, even when we were out there today, we noticed just chunks of the upper portions of the bank are falling down. And there were chunks of seagrass just sitting along the bank that clearly were there, or once were at the top of the bank and have fallen down. So that vertical portion, could have fallen already since the site visit, honestly. It could fall at any moment. And the fact that the structures, not just the dwelling, there's the hot tub out there, there's the stairs, there's the deck. The closest that those structures are to the top of the scarp is 1 foot. But if that portion of the upper bank were to fall, the deck would already be undercut and hanging over the edge, which is a significant safety concern. As far as the dwelling itself, the closest portion of the dwelling is about 12 feet, I believe, from the top of scarp. And so if that scarp, fell, it would probably be more like 5 or 6 feet from the top. It's tough to tell mathematically how to predict that. But as far as the helical foundations and stuff, I think John could speak more on that if you wanted to get really detailed. But the nature of the bank, our surveys show that it's eroding 6 to 7 feet per year with 6,000 yards of sand nourishment. If this upper portion were to fall, and then we had one significant storm event, we could see a lot of debris in on the coastal beach, on the bank, in the water, and this was all described in the emergency certification.
I think we can agree that the stairs are not in place now. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Do other members of the commission have questions at this stage?
Debbie, did you ask about the difference in the pound loading on the
I'm
helical?
going to wait till we heard from the engineer,
Okay.
who I thought might be able to explain that better. Leon?
I want to go back to our, what would be the danger to the health of the populace, but it would cause this emergency? And 2, is the recommended temporary remediation going to change the undercut getting taken out by the rain and wind?
Ben, I
Yep.
spoke with you today on the site about occupancy at the house. Could you please discuss that?
Thank you, Debbie. To the best of my knowledge, I know that Mark and Barbara were here several weeks ago. I don't know specifically whether they're planning on coming back in the immediate future. I know they had to go down out of state for a particular reason. So I assume that they are going to be occupying this property at different points over the year. So I think they'll be in there. I think to address the public safety concern, it's not just the safety of the occupants of the property. It's the safety of people on the beach if things go over. It's the safety of people endangered by debris on the beach, by buried debris on the beach, by whatever the materials are that come down the bank and end up in the beach. And then I think there's the environmental factors of having to remove that debris once it is on the beach. If you don't mind, whenever you're ready, I'd like to ask John Harrison to talk a little bit about the engineering of this particular structure and why, it's unique in its vulnerability to this present situation.
Before we get there, Ben, let me just make sure that the commission has no more further questions.
Okay.
John
Thank
Tumblr?
you. Yes.
In terms of the issue of the danger to the public of material on the beach or coming down the bank, there is already significant structures on the bank on this property that have that are in danger of further collapsing onto the beach, and nothing has been done about that. So I'm concerned that there might be a double standard here between what's a danger to the public that benefits the applicant and what's a danger to the public that the applicant is indifferent to. The other question I have is I don't want us to be doing something that's going to further undermine the bank, and that comes back to these pillars that are going to be put in the ground to hold up your rolls. I am concerned that action taken to deal with the emergency, quote unquote, are in fact going to make the situation worse. And I don't want that. And I don't think the owners want that.
Ben, could you respond please to the debris that's visible on the bank to the south, I believe it is, of the house? Is that on the property or is that on others' property?
I can't say whether it is or whether it isn't. It appears to me to be a septic tank that may have been associated with the former house on the property. That's my assumption, but I don't know that for a fact. And it looks to me, looking at a plot plan, whether that is within the confines of the Blash property. I think that, and I talked a little bit with Seth about this today. Removal of that structure, will cause further instability in that area of the bank. We think that, and the nature of the machinery, the equipment that would be used for this temporary installation isn't the type of machinery that would get that type of a heavy structure out of that bank and up off that bank. If in the future there's some activity on the beach that involves heavier equipment, it probably would be good to get it out of there. But we really want to make sure we don't destabilize the bank in that area by pulling that septic tank out of there. So I think it has to go at some point. It really does.
Leon?
Leon, you're on mute.
Leon, we can't hear you.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Back to John's point of, I would want to be walking on that beach and have that septic tank roll down on me. Or if it were on the beach, it would be unsightly and it's something you'd have to walk around. So why isn't that being taken care of rather than putting rolls of sand at the bottom of the cliff?
I'm happy to speak to that, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
The type of equipment that we would be using to build these sandbags, these coir tubes, is small, is compact. Its reach would be about 10 or 12 feet up and no higher. That septic tank is still in the bank presently. So the only way that we could remove that material would be to dig underneath, which is dangerous, destabilize the bank, let it roll out onto the beach, break it up, and then take it away with the crane. The crane that we use to put the equipment and materials on the bank would not reach that location. We have looked at that. If at some point larger equipment were available, I think the owner would be happy to remove that. But it's a feasibility issue. We don't have we can't get an excavator big enough to reach that septic tank and put it over with a crane. The geometry doesn't work. The physics don't work. It would be too large to lower with a crane. So it's a feasibility question. I think the owner would be happy to get rid of it, but there's no access onto that beach other than using some sort of barge or something like that.
John Portnoy?
Yeah, the structure that's in the scarp right now that's eroding out of the scarp is a leach field, not a septic tank. The septic tank already eroded onto the beach. And as far as I know, I saw it come apart on the beach over months. And as far as I know, it was never cleaned up. So you folks have a poor record of cleaning up public hazards along this beach.
Hillary, are you aware of what has been on the beach?
I believe we witnessed the septic tank eroding quite some time ago. And most recently, I think it was a leach pit.
Are there any other comments from the commissioners at this point? Amy?
I have a clarification.
No, sorry.
Michael, go ahead, and then Barbara.
As I understand it from Amy, if we approve this, then they have to come out with after the fact notice of intent, and we can put conditions on that. Is that correct?
Correct. Does that
Thank you.
Barbara?
I just want to say that I'm very uncomfortable making decisions about public health and safety when I've been trying to learn about the rules and regulations about conservation bylaws. So I'm just listening to other people at this point, but I feel very uncomfortable if I have to make a decision about public health and safety, which I think is what this emergency certification is about.
All right, Mr. Zender, do you have other experts here?
I do, Ms. Freeman. I have John Harris on the line, and I'd like him, John, if you don't mind, just to describe, the nature of the construction of the home and why the, why loss of the bank would be, and how that would affect the home. John, if you don't mind.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
We can now.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was muted there. Yes, my name's John Harrison. I'm the owner of Harrison Hamnet Consulting Structural Engineers in New Jersey, and I'm a licensed engineer in the state of Massachusetts. And my firm is the structural engineer of record of this portion of the house that's closest to the bank. This, when we got involved in this, the design, because of the way the earth was and the terrain and some regulations, we could not dig like a regular foundations for this portion of the house. The portion of the house back behind this is more of a standard foundation where you have footings on the ground, you have walls coming up, and then you're framed on that. But what we had to do is we had certain areas that we were allowed to drill these helical piles in. And we put as many as we could of the helical piles in. And let me describe the helical piles to you. It's almost like a big drill bit that you drill into the ground. It has an auger at the end of the thing that's kind of curved, so when you turn it, it drills itself into the ground. And the shaft of these helical piles is a square tube. It can be round, but a square tube which is about 3 to 4 inches in size. So it's not a very big shaft. So they drill these down a certain distance, how long as they are, and then they'll put another extension on it, and then they'll keep drilling down. And when they get to a certain point where it starts to torque up, that's when you just can't drill it anymore, and it really the machine registers that gives you the capacity of these helical piles, and they're somewhere in the neighborhood anywhere between 10 to 20 tons of capacity, which is pretty strong. And they derive their strength on the bearing pressure downwards down the bottom of it hooking into the soil, plus the lateral resistance on that shaft as it goes up through the ground up into the building. Now, what we did was we drilled these helical piles in, and then the floor of that kitchen area, I'll describe kitchen kind of a family room area if you've been to the house, is a concrete slab that was designed to span from the house, but picked up by these helical piles at these strategic locations. And this concrete slab, it will average between 8 to 10 inches thick of concrete. And just the weight of that alone is approximately probably between 100 to 125 pounds a square foot, because there are a series of concrete beams that are quite deeper than the slab that help transfer the load to the helical piles. And then the house is framed, a wood frame conventionally house is framed off that concrete slab that makes the house, but that concrete slab is probably somewhere between 2 to 3 to 4, I don't remember exactly, feet off the ground. So there's like a crawl space. You could actually crawl underneath this portion of the house. So it's almost like, like this flat plate that cantilevers out there. And the emergency part comes in with these helical piles, because they're 3 inches, the shaft is a very skinny shaft. It needs to be laterally supported by the earth or the sand that's around it, or it'll lose its capacity. So not only if you undermine the bottom of the helical piles, could you get a failure. If you start to take the sand and the earth away from the sides of this helical pile, it will just bend out of the way. It's just not strong enough without being braced. And a good example is, if you think, in my area down here, we build a lot of homes on timber piles, big, like a telephone pole that you drive into the ground. Well, that is a substance that's 10 to 12 inches in diameter, so it has some capacity to act as a column without being braced. You'll see a lot of times you'll drive it in the ground, it'll stick out of the ground 10 to 12 feet, and then they put a house on it, but it's stable even though it's not braced by the earth. Well, a helical pile isn't that way. It needs to be braced. It virtually will lose its strength if the sand around it erodes away from it. And the danger that you have in this house is, first of all, that could happen very quickly. I mean, the house could be fine and you could lose the sand, and that helical pile will bow or bend or lose its capacity. But the way that the building is designed is, okay, so the load that helical pile is supporting has to go somewhere. So that pile fails, then that load distributes out to the adjacent piles. So those adjacent piles, which were carrying X amount of load, are now carrying half of the load of the pile that was just failed over to that, which can cause, if that doesn't have the lateral support or loses its support, you will lose that pile. And the chances, the way the bank is going, it's not going to attack one pile at one time. It'll probably be almost all the piles that are out there along the edge of that kitchen addition. And it's like the domino effect, because you transfer this load to the adjacent pile that may still be there, which will overstress that and the failure. And then once you've lost a couple piles, the other piles just don't have the capacity to take that load, and then you're going to get a failure. So I think in one of my letters, I estimated just the weight of that concrete slab and the structure about 75,000 pounds. So that's going to come down, and it's going to go onto the beach, and this is probability. No one knows what's going to happen in a failure until it happens. But there's a good probability that it could slide down the beach. It will rip away from the main portion of that house. And that's the danger. The danger is not only to, people that are in the house, they're people on the beach, and also just we never want, my number one responsibility as a professional engineer is to protect the welfare and the safety of the public. And that's what we do. And and this one, you cannot predict what's going to happen if this thing was to fail. And the coming down the beach could be, even if there was someone close to the area, could be quite disturbing to a family, a young kid, or anybody. Just to have, not only if it didn't hurt anybody, just to visually see this thing happen, because with the bank not there, and the concrete with that much weight on there, and it's just sand, it's going to compress. It's going to slide down. I think it's going to slide down the hill. So that's my concern with the safety to the welfare and the safety to the public is I can't predict what's going to happen. I think no one can, but I can predict that if that sand keeps going away and the earth keeps going away from those piles, they will lose their strength. And not just so much in any house. Those piles are carrying real loads. These aren't, like live loads that, we design houses for of people and stuff like that. These are actual loads that are very, very heavy. A conventional floor of your house, if it's a wood framed house, probably weighs about 12 pounds a square foot, just the weight of the joist, the plywood. The mechanical stuff, the sheetrock that might be hanging off to it. This floor system weighs almost 10 to 12 times that because of the nature of what we had to do to make this thing work structurally. So it's a whole different animal that you have up there versus a standard type house, and that's where my concern is. Why I've written those letters and have stated that this is just. These loads are real. They are actual there. They're not just, code loads. So that's my concern. And it really, and the depth of these helical piles, they could be 80 feet. They could be, 20, they're not 80 feet, but they could be deeper, say, than the beach elevation level, and they could still fail if the sand and the earth around the shaft of this thing is not there. They just won't have it. Sometimes I look at it like a golf ball on a bunch of skinny tees if you took the sand away. And in a 3-inch shaft, that's very, very, very tiny, if it had to be unsupported for any length of distance, 10 to 20 feet, it would calculate to have virtually no carrying capacity. And that's all. If anyone has any questions, I'll be glad to help.
Let me start, and then I'll call on John Kumbler and Leon Shreve. How many helical pilings are there, and where are they? Do you have a diagram?
I do. I don't know the answer to how many. It's been a long time, but I have a drawing. My drawing is available that shows the location of the helical pile. That was our job, was to identify the helical piles and to design the structure above them. If I had to estimate, I want, and it's been a long time, but you're talking at least 15 to 20 helical piles.
Okay, and are you most concerned about the ones closest to the bank?
Yes.
And how much are they uncovered? Have you made any calculation to show us that?
No, I haven't done that calculation. I don't really know how I would do that. That's not really a structural calculation. The distance from the piling itself and the bank is going to be a contingent of what is that material, and then material being sand and being washed away. The more we take away, the less weight and the less that I have bracing those helical piles. And it's very difficult to determine, okay, if the bank was 10 feet away, would it be okay? If the bank was 5 feet away, would it be okay? Because the composite of that sand is very suspect to washing away, and that's why and I'm not an expert. I'm not a geotechnical engineer. I read a lot, and all my buildings we have geotechnical reports that I read. That the sand would be, is not a very stable material, and it will, if it doesn't have support at the bottom, it will run down, and then they'll leave those piles exposed.
Why did you build it this way?
Well, there was a requirement. Ben might be able to help more with that. The excavation for a standard foundation could not be in the area of that portion of the house, and that's why we had to design it that way, because we couldn't disturb the either the vegetation or the soil. I can't remember, and that's not that's critical to me. I was just told this is how we can build it, and we only have these areas where we can drill these piles, and that's all we can disturb of the site at that location.
Did you know the erosion rate at the site?
No.
Have you been to visit the site to observe what's happening?
Yes.
When?
Oh, well, if you can, it was last year, I believe. Time goes by so fast.
But you haven't been here to observe this emergency, quote unquote.
No, I haven't been. I think it was last fall when I was there. I could get my pictures out and find when it was. But no, I haven't been to the site this year.
Why not?
Well, I wasn't. My particular involvement has been is the design of the house and to learn about the safety of the house and of not so much of the bank erosion. When I was there at one time, which was I want to say the fall. I just don't know if it's 19 or 18, but my pictures will tell. That's when that was the last time we were there to see the bank.
Okay, so if the helical piles can support a concentrated load of approximately 40,000 pounds, and this weighs 75,000 pounds, and there are 15 pilings, is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
So is it?
Well, I don't know how many exactly. I'd have to look at my plans.
Okay, but just bear with me. Is it designed that if one fails, the others would support it? Is that part of the design?
No, it's not designed in that manner.
So there's no safeguards in this design?
No.
Okay. All right, John Kumpler?
Yes, I was going to ask the same question you did, Debbie, given the fact that the house was only built, 15 years ago or so? And it's clearly the bank was eroding. I'm astounded that this was their plan. It does seem to me the question of responsibility is very much on my mind. But I think it's obvious now this wasn't a very good design.
Madam Chairman, as you're aware, I do have another meeting that I am late for already. But before I left, I just wanted to make sure that no one had any further questions for me before.
No, I think we understand our task, which is to first decide whether it's an emergency or not. And then if it's an emergency, to decide whether or not we want to approve this plan for dealing with the emergency as to whether it's sufficient, overly sufficient, or inadequate.
Correct. And in my opinion, you could also approve elements of this plan. So,
Go ahead, Lauren. I was going to call on the public after we heard this, but go ahead.
Thank you. Since Amy has to leave, I wanted to ask this particular question, and I think that it's kind of germane. I have other questions, but one question I have is, are the timber pilings that are being contemplated considered coastal engineering structure elements?
So that's a very good question. So I did look into that when I got the emergency certification package. And there is a DEP case where the hearing officer determined, in a 41-page decision, determined that the timber pilings were a CES, and it had to do with the placement of the pilings and the fact that they were placed very close to each other and then they were staggered. So when you're looking at them, there was absolutely no openings. The commissioner, the secretary, overturned that determination with not a lot of explanation. That decision is now in Suffolk Superior Court, so it's pending. So I don't have a necessarily a legal definition if it is or if it's not. But those are the elements that this commission would want to look at, would be how many pilings there are, the spaces in between the pilings. Hillary asked a really good question in the beginning, which is, is there any other mechanism for, keeping these sandbags in place? And so, those are the questions that this commission, needs to ask. And will those, so the problem is if you have the pilings and there's no space in between for wave action, then it just gets deflected, and then it creates scouring. So, I'm not sure if Seth has an opinion as to, scouring on the abutting properties with regard to what he has designed, or if Seth has any options besides pilings. So, but unfortunately, I am sorry. I do need to go. So, okay. If my other meeting's quick, I'll come right back.
Thanks, Amy.
Okay, thank you.
I'd be happy to speak to that, Madam Chair, if you'd like me to, on the piles.
Yes.
So while I'm not aware of any other anchoring methodologies for sand-filled envelopes, there is the option of not using an anchor. So they are heavy, as I mentioned earlier, and in a storm they can move forward without those posts. Not very far. They just sort of tip seaward, and that wouldn't be beneficial here for what you just heard John explain, because then that loading isn't there anymore, which is why the piles were proposed. But if the commission felt that were not appropriate, certainly something is better than just loose sand here. And so I have seen sand envelopes. We have installed sand envelopes, my company has, previously, without any tow posts. So without any anchoring whatsoever. It's just gravity. They're heavy and they sit there. So I wanted to just offer that to the commission.
And you put sand on top of them, correct?
Yep, yeah, they're filled with sand and you put sand on top of them. Both of those things help them to keep them from moving. Given this is Cape Cod Bay and you can get some pretty intense storms, we thought the posts were appropriate, but if the commission did not agree, then I think the applicant would still like to do something, i.e. envelopes without posts would still be more effective at preventing damage to the home and to the beach area. That's helpful.
Are there further questions from the commission?
I'm much more sympathetic to the envelopes not being anchored with the posts. I don't think that's a good idea, but that's just my opinion.
Barbara?
Any history or data about scouring with just the envelopes?
I have not seen any significant scouring, and I believe the reason for that is during a storm, what happens to a sand-filled envelope is it slowly deflates. So with each wave that hits the envelope, for those of you that are familiar with that coir fabric, it's porous, and sand can pass through it. It just doesn't pass as quickly as loose sand does. So it slows the movement of sand. It absolutely does not stop the movement of sand. So as the wave hits it, the sand liquefies, the sand flows out of the envelope, but at a slower rate than if it were just loose, unencapsulated sand. And so that's why I don't believe there's, I haven't observed scour from envelopes, because in a storm condition, the soil can become liquefied, especially if there's a surge. And so liquids don't reflect as much as solids, and especially when they're losing volume. This envelope is not proposed to go right to the property line. So if there were any sort of end effects, which you can get with anything along the shoreline, you can see that with a single rock on a shoreline, you'll see an end effect after a storm. One side of the rock will have more sand on it than the other. It would certainly be confined to 1440 Chequesset Neck. So I'm very confident there'd be no downdrift issues or issues. With soft alternatives such as this, I've never observed any end effect greater than about 8 feet. So well within the property boundaries.
Does that answer your question, Barbara?
Yes.
Are there other questions from the commissioners? Are there questions? I'm sorry? Are there questions from the public? Lauren McKeon?
Thanks. Nice to see many of you again. I had a question about, I had 2 questions. One was, could a larger crane remove the septic tank from the top of the bank, a larger crane that's being contemplated by this project? The conservation agent has successfully gotten septic tanks removed from the ocean side that were in very precarious situations as well. And it's really a matter of what equipment is available and made available. And I know that she has been pressing this issue for a number of years. I'm going to say 2, 3, or 4 years. She's been asking for this particular septic tank to be removed. So that's a ongoing concern for us. And then I think I need to ask, is the applicant aware that the NPS in this case would need to issue a permit to authorize this because it's construction activity below mean high water? In the past, it's just been beach nourishment activity. So that's a differentiation. So, and we don't have to answer that necessarily tonight, but I need to throw it out there.
Can you repeat that, Lauren, just so I can be clear on what you said?
Okay, yes. Is the applicant aware NPS would need to issue a permit to authorize the construction activity below mean high water? If you look at the prior Blash correspondence for the prior notice of intent, there are some legal citations in those letters, and they can be referred to that are germane here.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ben, could you respond to that, please?
I can, Madam Chairman. We look at that when the letter was initially sent. This land is not National Seashore land. It's completely owned by the Blash family all the way out to the waters of the bay. So, but I don't want to say I don't agree with Lauren because I haven't looked at that issue in a couple of years. So if we do need permission from the seashore, that would be independent of any permits granted by this board.
Yes, I think you're correct. It would be independent, but I just, there are the 2 citations and read together because it's below mean high water. There is jurisdiction of this because the seashore jurisdiction is throughout the waterways, whether or not it's private, state, or federal ownership of the submerged lands. Thank you.
Okay, so I don't think that's a wrinkle within our purview, but I appreciate your bringing that up. Mr. Wilkerson, if you can respond to the issue of the larger crane and the ability to remove the debris.
Certainly. If anyone's been out to see when the crane has been in place, there's literally no room in the Blosh driveway to accommodate anything, more than a couple of feet larger. If access were granted over some, beach location and a tracked excavator could come down the beach, then absolutely. But as far as craning, I don't believe you could get a crane close enough to the little public beach just to the south. That's a very narrow sand path now, and it's a challenging exercise just to fit the crane, which is just barely able to lower the small pieces of equipment down. So I'm not aware of any feasible way to get a larger piece of equipment down via crane. It would have to be some sort of barge intervention.
Hillary, do you have any comment on that?
No, I have a separate question.
Okay, please go ahead.
When would you expect to be able to file a notice of intent for this project?
Would Nate like to answer that, maybe?
Yeah, we're already in the process of doing it. We did a full site survey, like an updated site survey, so we have that information. So it's just a matter of getting all the necessary documents together. So I would say within a couple weeks of construction, honestly.
Are there other questions from the public? Could I ask the commissioners what their thoughts are on the use of the envelopes without the piles?
I'm much
Debbie?
more comfortable without the piles.
Michael?
Yes, I would agree.
John Portnoy?
Yes, I feel the same.
John Kumbler?
Feel the same.
Barbara?
I feel the same, but I'm still reluctant to make any decisions about public health and safety.
Okay. Well, I think at this point, we need to decide whether an emergency situation exists. What are your thoughts on that?
Debbie?
Yes, Michael.
I don't think that a house or even part of a house on the beach is going to be beneficial or non-harmful to the environment. And if we permit this these coir envelopes to be put in, it would only help the situation. It might not stop it, but it would only help it.
Okay, the question is it an emergency?
Well, I feel there's a significant amount of evidence that it could be an emergency, and it would be a high risk to say it isn't.
Okay. Does anybody have anything to say about the emergency issue?
I guess I'm wondering what the harm is in declaring an emergency, understanding that a notice of intent is going to come in. I mean, we've never determined a house going over the edge not to be an emergency, and none of us are sort of keepers of the time or the tides, and so we don't know what tomorrow brings. I mean, we've had a tornado, we've had monsoon rains in 2 weeks' time, so I guess I'm a little fearful that if we don't declare an emergency, if we don't declare it an emergency, we can't move forward with this application. And if it's going to take these guys another 3 to 6 weeks to file a notice of intent, who knows what's going to happen? And I guess my only wish is that it would have come in as a notice of intent and not put us in this position to sort of be on the fence about whether the whole commission feels it's an emergency or not. So we're in a bad position, but I think we can safely determine that it is an emergency, because none of us want to not determine it an emergency and have it go over in a tornado that's coming in 2 weeks. So while their septic tank, their current functioning septic system isn't going over the edge, if there are people walking on the beach during some storm that's unforeseen to us and parts of the hot tub go over, then we would have been remiss. So I don't think anything we do and approve doesn't set a precedent, as we know. We've never, ever approved any type of soft solution structure or hard solution structure on an emergency certification form. But if DEP thinks we can do it, then I think you should be all for getting behind it at this point. It's a soft solution. They're willing to take out the pilings, and maybe it will buy us some time to see if this type of a solution will work. So I think we can, with a straight face, say that it is an emergency, but it would be preferable if you could all get on board with that.
I happen to agree with Hillary that I don't feel comfortable with the cement slab hanging there over the beach, threatening possibly to come down, probably to come down, I don't know. And the engineer did not clarify enough for me to indicate when and how and where it will come down, if it will come down. But given that, I do not want to be responsible for someone getting hurt. And that's my fear. And if we can get the NOI or an agreement to file the NOI as quickly as possible, and we do not have pilings, I would feel comfortable. John Kumbler?
Yeah, I mean, I have a little trouble imagining these people wandering the beach in the face of this huge storm that's also going to endanger the house. But that aside, I tend to agree with Hillary, but I want to make sure that when we eventually get the NRI, we are able to put conditions on. I don't want this to be a precedent for anything else than a temporary soft solution. And I'm willing to say, yes, it's an emergency for a temporary soft solution if in the future we can put conditions.
Hillary, is there any limitation?
Well, there's no limitation, because, I mean, who knows if in 10 years we may have this problem at another property and be faced with the same type of situation. We just don't know. But we do know that this applicant is going to come back with a full notice of intent, and the installation will be in. We can attach conditions to it, and we can debate the merits of it at that time in much greater detail and request more information or more reviews or more this or more that, and then make a final determination. So this approval gives them emergency certification to go forth and install this now. Then we get the notice of intent in, we hold the public hearing, abutters get formally notified, and we weigh the merits of the project at that time.
Seth Wilkerson?
I just wanted to offer that I think the team can certainly commit to filing a notice of intent within 30 days, if I heard Nate correctly, and I can absolutely have a revised plan to Hillary prior to any start, which shows no piles in front of the envelope. So it would just be the envelopes as you see them with no posts or piles, if that's helpful.
In your notice of intent, would you please show us the locations on the property of the helical piles? And if you can, calculate or have the engineer calculate how exposed they are at present and what's been happening in those locations, because that's, you know, from what he says, that's of grave concern.
Sure. I think that's very reasonable.
Also, if you can include the cost of the project.
Yeah, we haven't discussed a bond.
We had discussed it with Ben when we met on site.
Okay, and could you fill us in on that, please?
Yeah, Ben, do you want to?
Well, Hillary suggested a bond of 1.5 times the estimated construction cost. I've talked about that with our team and also with Mark. First of all, we don't even have a cost yet, but the nature of this bond, and I want to take some time with this if the board doesn't mind or the commission doesn't mind. The bond is, I believe the purpose of the bond is to make sure that during the course of this construction, the site is left in proper condition, meaning materials are removed, equipment's removed, and things are removed. That doesn't bear any relationship to the cost of the project. In some situations that we deal with, for example, a planning board covenant to build a road, the bond is there at 1.5 times the cost to make sure that the work is completed if the applicant doesn't complete it. This is not a situation where the board is in a position to want to complete this temporary soft solution. So we think that the bond should be a bond that's reasonably related to the cost of making sure that the site is cleaned up, debris is removed, equipment's removed, and that bond should be during the period of the construction. I don't really know what that number is. I can have Seth talk to what that cost would be. As you can well imagine, the total cost of production of this project is going to be fairly substantial, and that has no relationship at all to what an appropriate bond would be. So that being said, Mark and Barbara are certainly willing to post a bond. It just has to be, I hate the word reasonable, but it has to be reasonable.
So if we could understand just sort of what the bond would be used for, I can certainly provide some insight. If it's to make sure the project gets completed, that's one thing. If it's more of a cleanup, which is what we tend to see more frequently, what if there's a major storm and there's materials on the beach and that needs to be cleaned up? That's just a different value, and I'm happy to speak to either one if I could just get some direction on that.
So I think we want to see it for cleanup and making sure there are no hazardous conditions that remain at any point in time.
Okay.
Well, for example, when you were there last, there was gasoline stored on the beach to be used in the machinery, and that could spill. There could be all sorts of problems with that.
John Kumbler.
There's a lot of heavy equipment that's going to be brought to the edge of this bank in this project. There's the possibility that the compacting of the sand will lead to a significant greater erosion of the beach. In fact, a whole collapse of that area of the coastal bank. That would involve a great deal of remediation. So I think that has to be considered when we think about what this bond will be.
So our bylaw says that the bond shall not exceed 150% of the estimated cost of the work required or the restoration of affected lands and properties if the work is not performed as required, whichever is greater.
See, the bond is not to correct something that happens. The bond, Hillary, could you read that last part again?
Sure. Other evidence of financial responsibility which is satisfactory to the commission may be accepted in lieu of bonding. Notwithstanding the above, the amount of such bond shall not exceed 150% of the estimated cost of the work required or the restoration of affected lands and properties if the work is not performed as required, whichever is greater.
Yeah.
If I may, Madam Chairwoman.
Go ahead.
That's a bylaw. That's a maximum on the amount of the bond that the commission can impose. I think in this case, I'd like to go back to what Seth is asking, which is what is the purpose of this bond? I disagree with Mr. Kumbler. I don't think the bond amount is based upon a potential diminution in the land value, based on some mistake that gets made. I think it's the cost of remediating, and making sure the project is completed responsibly. So, I think that number, and I hate to say this, and I hate to sound flip, but that essentially it's going to be an arbitrary number. It's going to have to be because there is no hard science as to what it would cost to remediate something. But
so what do you?
All I'm saying is bonds of hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's just I think it's inappropriate. What I'm saying is bonds of hundreds of thousands of dollars is inappropriate here. So
Can we let Seth come up with an appropriate number that he feels is adequate? He's the professional in remediation and mitigation. I mean, he's, I don't think he's gonna throw out a faulty number to us.
absolutely, I think that's fine.
Sure. And so I would say for general purposes of what I've heard this evening, I think something in the realm of $30,000 could. I can't think of anything that could happen at this site that couldn't be remediated for that amount. I understand there's concerns about the structural integrity, of the embankment, but we have done this twice before with higher volumes of sand, and we haven't seen any collapse during that time. So I think that's encouraging that it's unlikely that any of this work, which would be occurring on the beach at the toe, would destabilize the embankment. Certainly the owners wouldn't be making this sort of investment if they thought that was a significant risk. But that number to me, just, having done this for a couple decades, I can't think of anything that couldn't be resolved for that amount. And if you, during the construction, phase, and if you wanted to, add 50% to that to accommodate for contingencies, that's the sort of number that seems rational to me.
Seth, what is the entire cost of this project?
I'm hesitating a little bit because we needed to, given how quickly this came up and the concerns came up, we've reached out to another contractor to provide some assistance to us on this. They're very experienced. They actually have been doing envelopes longer than we have, which I think they're the only company that's done that longer than we have. Unfortunately, the person we were dealing with got COVID and just was released from the hospital. So there's been a delay in the pricing, and we got some preliminary pricing literally about an hour before the hearing. And when we were working with DP on this, we were trying to start on this coming Monday. So things are moving rather quickly, because I can speak for the whole team and say we are all very concerned that this home is one bad storm away from substantial damage, which, as you heard from John, could end up on the beach. So we're still pulling all those numbers together. We'll probably have them tomorrow, but I can tell you this is certainly it's in excess of $100,000 project.
So is it 150? Is it 200?
We don't have that level of specificity yet there. I would say it's probably in the realm of 150.
Okay.
I just don't want to give you, I haven't given the price to the owner yet, so, because we don't have it yet. So he'll be getting that in the next couple of days. I'm happy to share that as soon as we have it with Hillary.
All right. I'm thinking of a bond of at least $50,000. I don't know if any other people have comments on that.
I think 50 is better than 30. I mean, there is a chance that something bad will happen. A lot of the cliff is eroded away since the last time they replenished the sand. So who knows how it's going to be this week.
Madam Chairwoman.
Mr. Sender.
And I'm throwing this in to assist the commission in the thought process. It's not only the amount of the bond, it's what the bond is and how long it's held. And, I think, the easiest form of a bond is to have the applicant deposit that sum of money into an escrow account with a town. And I can't recall whether it's deposited with the town treasurer or whether it goes into a local bank with co-signatories. But I understand that bond is during the period of the construction of this emergency work, meaning when the emergency work is completed and reviewed by the agent, that the bond is released. And I want to make sure the board is thinking about that as they make this decision.
Would you agree to have the bond in place pending the notice of intent being filed? I assume the work will be completed and the notice of intent will be filed at approximately the same time.
Yeah, I think that our intention is that the notice of intent will be filed prior to the work being done. The work under the emergency certification provisions of the DEP regulations, the work can't take more than 30 days. On day 30, we have to pull everything out of there, which is one of the reasons why, from a timing standpoint, it's really important that that emergency certification, if this board were to grant one, is dated and issued on a date that the applicant can commence work. And so, and I'm trying not to get too far ahead of what the commission is doing right now, but I'm putting these out there so you can think about them as part of this process. When we were working with the DEP on this, our discussions were geared on the DEP side of it as well, so that the date of the issuance of a certification was a date that we knew that we had contractors in place that could begin the work. And so that, hopefully, barring any really critical weather situations or tide situations, we had that time. So I think what we're thinking is that if there's a certification to issue, then it's issued on a particular date, the work commences, it's a full 30-day work cycle to get it done, but that notice of intent is filed within that period, well within that period, so it's in front of the board, but that we anticipate that the bond itself would be released upon the completion of the work, that it wouldn't be something that's sitting there on the table for the board to be using as a part of the discussion of the notice of intent itself.
I think we're thinking the same way.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? I think we really have to do this in two parts, and I would ask for a vote on whether or not the commission deems this an emergency. Could I have that motion, please?
So moved, Mike.
Is there a second?
Second, John Kumbler.
I need a voice vote. Leon Shreve, how do you vote?
Yes.
John Kumbler,
Yes.
Ben Fairbank,
Yes.
Barbara Brennesel,
Abstain.
Michael Fisher,
Yes.
and Debbie Freeman, yes. And the next vote would be,
Did you get John Portnoy?
I'm sorry, did I skip you? John Portnoy?
Yeah, I vote yes.
Okay, I apologize. The next vote would be, what project do you wish to approve to abate the emergency? Could I have a motion on that?
Michael Fisher, I move that we approve the Coyer sand envelope without any pilings.
Is that clear to you, Mr. Wilkinson? Do you need further guidance?
Looks like he stepped away for a moment.
Okay, Nate, can you respond? Nate Jones?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm asking, if we say that we were to approve the proposal without the pilings, do you understand what we mean?
Yes, it's very clear, and we can draw up so there's no confusion. We can amend the drawings and deliver them to Hillary in the next day or two.
Okay. All right, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second. Leon.
All right, now the only thing we need, Ben, is if we vote on this now, we need to be able to make a date for its applicability so that you can commence construction and get the full 30 days.
What I would ask the board to do, I'm cutting this from whole cloth, I apologize, is that the board, if it does, votes to issue the emergency certification on a date to be commenced and the notification to issue to be determined by the conservation agent in consultation with the applicant. Because, as Seth said, they still have to go back and make sure that their people are ready to start.
Okay, so
I guess I just want to raise the matter here that if you could notify me during standard working business hours, not on holidays, not after hours, that would really be great, so that I can be in my office and issue and mail a copy to the DEP, because it's important that we meet the requirements.
Hillary, absolutely. And I will, offline, I will discuss with you holidays and which ones are important. Okay, thank you. But the answer to that is yes.
Thank you.
So the vote now is, having determined an emergency, do we wish to remediate the emergency with the proposal without pilings? How do you vote, Leon?
Yes.
John Kumbler?
Yes.
Ben Fairbank?
Yes.
Barbara Brennesel?
I think I have to abstain again, don't I? I think I do.
John
Yeah.
Portnoy?
Yes.
Michael Fisher?
Yes.
Debbie Freeman, yes. And it's our condition, not really a condition, but it's part of this, that you will communicate closely with the agent during appropriate business hours as to when construction can start, so that we can have a date established for the 30 days to run. Is that correct, Mr. Zender?
Yes, it is, Madam Chairwoman.
So is there anything else we need to do on this matter?
We probably want the fourth condition about the bond.
Okay, I need a motion for a bond for the 30 days until the remediation is completed appropriately in the amount of $50,000, set in the terms that the agent and Mr. Zender work out with the town as to what's appropriate. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
All right, could I have that motion, please?
So moved, Michael.
Is there a second?
Leon seconds.
Okay, we need a vote. Leon?
Yes.
John Kumbler?
Yes.
Ben Fairbank?
Yes.
Barbara Brennesel?
I think I could vote yes on this.
John Portnoy?
Yes.
Michael Fisher?
Yes.
And Debbie Freeman, yes. Okay. Hillary, is there anything else we need to do on this?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, then it's my,
Could I just ask a quick question while everyone's together?
Sure.
It's procedural, and it's primarily to Hillary. We did have a target start date of this Monday, the 7th, which we still think we can do, provided we could have this escrow account set up by the end of this week. Hillary, and we'd certainly be in touch on the details, but would that be acceptable?
Yeah, I could get the paperwork issued on Friday and fax that to the DEP.
Okay, thank you.
okay. Then I think that will end the emergency certification matter for 1440 Chequesset Neck Road. As to the other matters we would normally address in the business meeting, my inclination is to hold those over till next time, unless someone else would like to hear those now. Not hearing anyone desiring to hear those matters, I suggest that we adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, could we have
Second.
a voice vote on that? Leon?
Yes.
John Kumbler?
Yes.
John Portnoy?
Yes.
Ben Fairbank?
Yes.
Barbara Brennesel?
Yes.
Michael Fisher?
Yes.
Debbie Freeman? Yes. Thank you all very much.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everybody.
Thank
Debbie.
Thank you, everyone.
you. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
That was a bear, but you did a great job.
Thank you, Chris.
You look exhausted.
I am tired.
Yeah, I am too. Okay, well, take care then. Do you need
You too.
the meeting?
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, take care.